Go ahead and get started.
Um,
We'll go ahead and get started this evening. Are there any changes to the agenda? Okay, seeing no changes. We'll start with the resident survey. Kelly, do you want to start that
I've
off?
been doing it since February, and this just started in October.
Thank you, Mayor. I would like to introduce Lori Urban. She's with the National Research Center in Boulder. Their firm is a company that specializes in conducting surveys for cities, counties, school districts, townships. Lori's going to tell you a little bit more about the company and about the survey that they performed. Lori.
Welcome to Littleton.
Thank you for having me. Welcome. Good evening, Mayor Brinkman and members of the council. I really appreciate you having me here tonight to discuss the results of your 2012 citizen survey. And also I'd like to give a special thanks to Kelly Nardi and Michael Penny for helping develop the questions as well as facilitating all the logistics that I needed to get from the city in order to get the survey rolling. National Research Center has been conducting surveys for local governments for over 20 years, and our principals have worked in local government prior to founding the company. In 1994, we've conducted thousands of surveys in over 300 communities across the country, a number of which are Front Range communities, and generally I manage a lot of the projects for the Front Range communities. I believe we have over 30 jurisdictions in the Front Range, to which we have provided comparisons for Littleton. Our principals have been doing survey research, as I mentioned, for over 20 years, and they actually have written a book on conducting surveys, citizen surveys in particular, which was published by the International City County Management Association, ICMA. And we have a special partnership with ICMA. We have a special product, a templatized survey called the National Citizen Survey that they have worked with us to help get the word out about how important citizen surveying is, and that it can provide local government and elected officials with very valuable data about helping to prioritize, to plan, where to cut back, generally getting the voice of the residents. Littleton is among an elite group of communities. There are over 3,000 counties and 19,000 cities, towns, villages across the United States, and very few of them actually survey their residents. So Littleton, in just doing the survey, is already doing something that many communities aren't doing. These kinds of surveys are about transparency and accountability. It's a window into your performance. It's getting a different voice than who you typically hear from, those who attend your meetings, those who contact staff. We're talking to a representative portion of the population and getting their feedback, typically people that you don't hear from. This does simulate best practices of private sector research, and we help the city and other communities interpret their data by providing a benchmark comparison database that NRC alone has compiled over tens of years. We collect data, not just the survey data that we administer and surveys that we conduct, but data from other communities that other firms have conducted. We compile those data into the benchmark database so that we can provide you with more fair comparisons of fire services to other communities' fire services versus fire services to streets, which always generally get lower ratings. And so this presentation tonight is going to be a summary of the mounds of data that you will find in the final report, which I hear will be given out in about a week. We're still working on some of the changes to the draft, and that report should be given to you in the next week or so. So this presentation is a summary of all that detail that you can find in the report. And although there is a lot of data in this report, these kinds of surveys are perception surveys. You're getting residents, broad feedback on a number of different topics. So once you look at the results and you dive a little bit deeper, you might find that additional questions are raised, other research might need to be conducted, even just using data that the city already gathers, that staff already gather, to kind of play into the citizen survey data and how you can use it to help in your planning process. As I go along, I definitely welcome any questions. Don't feel like you have to hold those until the end. Please feel free to ask as they come up. As I mentioned, citizen survey results can be used to monitor your progress. This is the first iteration of a citizen survey that the city has conducted in, I believe, over 20 years. So once you conduct the survey again, we'll be able to build on that and build a trend line of your responses, just to take the pulse of the community and see how things are going. Are the changes you're making being noticed? Are residents agreeing with the changes you're making? That kind of thing. And we also can use the data to help inform budget, land use planning, and strategic planning. And as I mentioned, we do have the ability to benchmark your ratings to other communities across the country. And we also provide a custom set of benchmarks to other Front Range jurisdictions. The methodologies that we use for the 2012 survey are what we have done in hundreds of communities across the country. We mailed a survey to 3,000 randomly selected households out of the total 18,000 households. We geocode the addresses. We use a USPS mailing list, and we geocode addresses to ensure that the addresses that are eligible to be sampled fall within the community boundaries. And then we randomly select 3,000 households. We also oversample the attached units, because we know that those people tend to respond at a lower rate to citizen surveys or surveys in general.
What's that again?
We oversample attached units. So
Apartments you're talking about?
apartments or condos or townhomes, because people who tend to live in those areas, either in lower income areas, are younger, they tend to respond, renters tend to respond at lower rates to surveys. Excuse me.
In the sampling, you're looking for some sort of spread, I'm sure, at least coming from the responses. Do you know what responses came from owned versus rented?
Yes, we do have that data. It is provided in the full report, and I can grab that for you here. One of the things that we also do, we did hear from 921 households for a response rate of 32%, which is a great response rate. Typically, the average for our mailed surveys is between 25 and 40%, and we do see those response rates slightly declining, not as quickly as telephone response rates, but definitely have been slightly declining over the years. But 32% for your first survey is a great response rate. So one of the things that we do is we weight the survey data to help so that we look at the demographic profile of those who we heard back from, and we do our best to match it as closely as possible to the entire adult population in Littleton, so that we can say that those 921 people we heard back from can represent the entire community. I was trying to find that.
Lori, along with that, what do you do if there's a grouping that's in your demographic profile, but you have maybe a singular response? What do you do then?
It's very rare that there's a singular response based on the demographics that we ask. 64% owners is what we have, and 36% rent. It is pretty rare, and honestly, I don't think I've ever come across a single respondent in a specific response category. It does pose problems, absolutely, for weighting the data and trying to get that representativeness. Males 18 to 34 are very hard to hear from, big challenge. So a lot of times, we will do our best to adjust. The analysis program that we use will give us certain weights to assign to a proportion of those people. So we look at that, and if it's making 8 people represent 100, that's a little over the top. So we'll kind of trim back that weight just to make it a little bit more reasonable, so that 8 people really aren't representing 100. So that might be when you do get the full survey results, we have a weighting table that shows here's the population norm, here's the unweighted data, who we heard back from, and then once we applied those weights, this is what those proportions look like, so that you can see that.
If it's anything like my children, 18 to 34 males respond best by text.
We'll try that. I don't know if they complete a 5-page survey via texting, but it'd be interesting, an interesting research project. So based on those 921 completes, when you're looking at the ratings, the margin of error around each of those percentages is plus or minus 3 percentage points, which is pretty standard margin of error for a sample that size. And additionally, to the national and front range benchmark comparisons that I mentioned earlier, we also provide breakdowns by certain sociodemographic characteristics of respondents. I do have some of that information here. I'm not really planning on talking about it since we have a lot of information to cover, but all of those data are in the report. There's text that explains those comparisons throughout, as well as full sets of tables with lots of numbers for those of you who are data junkies. One of the first few questions we asked on the survey were measuring resident opinion about their quality of life in the community. And generally, as you can see, residents rated the quality of life in Littleton very highly. Nearly all gave excellent or good evaluations to the city as a place to live, the overall quality of life in the community, Littleton as a place to raise children, and their neighborhood as a place to live. We did see slightly lower ratings, but still very, very positive for Littleton as a place to retire and as a place to work. And even though those did get lower ratings than those 96%, that's the percent excellent or good, they still were rated much above the national and front range benchmark. Generally throughout the presentation, you'll see these arrows that indicate the comparison to the benchmarks. And when we talk about it being much above versus sometimes we'll talk about it being above, that's a metric that's being used based on the margin of error. When it's much above, it's more than twice the margin of error. Yes, you had a question.
Yes, so, for example, Littleton is a place to work. Was there any place in the survey for, not just for this, but other questions too, if they gave low ratings, to say why?
We didn't include those kinds of questions. That is something that we can do. Generally, it can be somewhat cost prohibitive, and it also can seem burdensome to respondents if they see a fill in the blank. A lot of times they'll feel that, oh, the survey is going to be like homework and it's going to take a lot more time to complete, so I won't complete it. So that's part of why we generally don't have that kind of more detail.
But that could have been an option, right? They wouldn't have to complete it. They could skip any of the questions.
They absolutely can skip any of the questions, that's right.
But it seems to me that the whys are as important as checking a box.
The whys are absolutely important. This survey is designed to capture those first bits of data. It's a starting point to look at the areas where maybe the city has some opportunities to improve, maybe adding services, modifying services to meet residents' needs. It identifies those, and then next steps need to be taken. Including those kinds of data, absolutely, that happens on citizen surveys where you see if you've given a fair or poor rating, please tell us why. Those kinds of fill in the blanks we do feel can deter people from responding to surveys. We also asked residents to tell us why they lived in Littleton. We provided a list of various responses. These are the top 4 selected answers for why they live in Littleton. They were able to write in, if there wasn't a reason listed on the survey, they were able to write in an other response, and those data are included in the full report. Generally, people like the location, they feel safe. They also enjoy their neighborhoods and like living in Littleton because they have friends and family in the area. People were less likely to cite the cost of living, liking the school their children attended, housing and rental rates being affordable, and having always lived in the community as reasons why they live in Littleton. Yes?
Were they able to choose multiple answers here?
Yes.
So they could choose as many as they fit what they felt?
Yes, absolutely.
So this would apply. This question applies to other questions too. I mean, other things. Do we know the neighborhood and/or the district that they live in? Are the data compiled that way?
We did not choose to track the district or the geographic area of respondents for this iteration of the survey, but that's definitely something that we can do for future iterations if council is interested in knowing that.
Too late, of course, to do that. That would be critical. I mean, in the first iteration even. But
Well, definitely we can make notes and consider that. I'm sorry. Did you? Oh, no.
Lori?
Yes.
On the question for this with the responses, was it a singular list or did you rotate the listing among the surveys?
No, it was a singular list. We did not randomly reposition. The surveys kind of cost a lot more to be able to do that. So definitely, great question. Another question that we asked, we provided respondents with 7 statements, and we asked them to tell us if they agreed or disagreed that each statement describes the community. And generally, at least 3/4 of respondents somewhat or strongly agreed that each of these statements best describes the city of Littleton, with nearly all feeling that it's a safe community and also has a low crime rate. People were less likely to agree, but still 74%, that traffic flows well on city streets. Overall, residents feel very safe in and around the city. We asked them to evaluate their safety or sense of safety during the day and at night in different areas around the city. Generally, respondents felt safer during the day and at night, which is what we see in most communities. And where comparisons were available, ratings generally tended to be much higher than the national and Front Range benchmarks. Similar to the reasons why they lived in Littleton, we wanted to know what respondents felt were the 3 most pressing issues facing the city. Respondents were able to select up to 3. There was a list of 17 items, and then there was an other fill in the blank where they could write in some other issue that they felt was pressing. Again, those data are included in the full report. Here we're looking at the 5 issues that respondents most frequently mentioned, potential issues that they most frequently mentioned that is facing the city. Job growth came to have the highest proportion of respondents, 33%. Traffic, business retention and attraction, as well as street maintenance tended to round out that list of what respondents felt were the most pressing. Less than 10% of respondents said that maintaining city properties and buildings was a pressing issue, the community image, trails, leisure activities, and fire protection.
Lori, on these, of the list of 17, were they limited in how many they could choose?
Yes, 3. They were able to choose 3 options. Of course, there are always some people who choose more than that, so we will clean those data randomly, select 3 of the many that they chose to represent their opinions.
Just a quick clarification. So the interpretation of this, the 2 slides back, you had the city is a safe community, had 97%, but the most pressing issue facing the city was job growth at 33%. So 97% of the respondents felt the city was strongly or somewhat agree that the city is safe, and how do you interpret the 33 then? Is that was the biggest concern of what percent of the respondents? 33%?
It's 33%, so it was considered a multiple response question because people
so
could...
Is supposed to add to 100? Is that
No, it does not add to 100. And these aren't all of the responses. There are some responses that we've left off here for room considerations. But because it is a multiple response, they were able to select the 3. So it's the 33% of people selecting job growth as one of their top 3 issues facing the city. So it isn't out of all respondents. It doesn't total to 100 because people could select multiple. Yes.
So is it possible for us to have a copy of the actual survey that people receive? So we could...
Yes, that definitely is included in the full report that will be given out in a week's time. Is that correct? So, yes, I'm here. We also wanted to learn what residents thought about the city promoting itself as a location to do business, shopping, recreation, and entertainment, as well as how important residents felt it was to shop in Littleton versus in other communities or online. And generally, residents felt that this was essential or very important, with 8 and 10 saying that it was important for Littleton to promote itself as a location for business, shopping, and recreation. And then about 2/3 had said that they felt it was essential or very important to them to shop locally in Littleton. The survey also gauged residents' perception on the quality of city service delivery, as well as the importance of city services. We wanted to know overall, considering all the services that Littleton provides to residents, how would you rate the quality of those services? Generally, 90% of respondents felt that the quality of services overall provided by the city was excellent or good. Only 1% believed it was poor. Generally, these ratings tended to be much higher than what we find in other communities across the country and in the Front Range. We first asked residents to rate the quality of a list of 39 different services provided in or by the City of Littleton. Here we're looking at the 3 highest rated and the 3 lowest rated, as well as their comparisons to the national and Front Range benchmarks. Littleton Fire Rescue, the Buck Recreation Center, and Parks and Trails, received the highest ratings. With the lowest ratings being affordable childcare, downtown parking, and job opportunities. Again, generally, ratings for all 39 services were much above the benchmark comparisons. You can see affordable childcare had a rating that was similar to what we see in other communities across the Front Range, and parking downtown tended to get ratings that were much lower than what we see in other communities across the nation and in the Front Range. Some of the other, yes?
And like in the affordable childcare, if they answered that question, do we know if they had children or not? Are they just guessing that it's affordable or not affordable?
Because we aren't asking these questions only of people who have used the services, there was an option for people to say don't know if they weren't able to answer the question. Sometimes it is based on personal experience. Sometimes it's based on my friend has a child and I know she's having trouble finding health care. So it's based on what you know of what other people have experienced. But there is definitely always an option for people to select don't know if they feel that they can't answer the question. So these percentages are representative of those people who gave an evaluative response. These exclude those who said don't know.
I think that same question, Jim, would be applicable almost to every question, like job opportunities, do you need a job? I mean, if you don't need a job, so I think it almost applies to everyone.
That's very true. Some of the other ratings for services that aren't shown on this slide that received ratings that were much lower than the national Front Range comparisons were snow plowing. Also received lower ratings when compared to other communities. Compared to the Front Range, open space areas also received ratings that were similar, and again, snow plowing and availability of parking downtown received ratings similar to the Front Range. When asking about the importance of those same 39 services, this was a grid-style question where you have the items listed, then they first get the opportunity to rate the quality, and then they get the opportunity to rate the importance of each of these services. Safety services, fire and rescue, police department tended to top the list, along with the cleanliness and appearance of the city, as well as snow plowing and traffic flow. These were the items that respondents believed were the most important services that the city delivers. a lot of these services did receive a high proportion of people saying don't know, particularly the services that are less frequently used, such as the candlelight walk, 4th of July things, those kinds of events or activities where people have less experience with them tended to have higher don't knows. The least important services were candlelight walk, the Police Citizens Academy, passport services, and Littleton calendar, and again, likely because there are very high don't knows to those questions. People just don't know about those services or don't use them. Did you have a question? No. Okay.
You guys ask, was there an omnibus question in there?
Yes.
Where'd that one rate out of curiosity?
Do we ask it in the big grid or just in the smaller? We do have a specific section that we ask specifically about transportation services, and it did fare well, I believe, omnibus.
Sure, have to look. I mean, if it's in there, we can go get it.
Yeah, I think we'll get to that in a few minutes. So one way to help prioritize services and delivery of services is to compare the perceived value or importance of services to those quality ratings. So what we did here was we ranked the services from highest to lowest importance and highest to lowest quality, so that we could split the list in half and figure out where residents place a higher importance to services that are receiving lower quality in their opinions. So that upper left quadrant with that pink circle, if you can tell that it's pink, are services that were deemed higher in importance and lower in quality. In order to take a look at where these fall relative to each other, we were able to plot these ratings on a graph so that you can see for that quadrant in particular, where are the services that are the most important that potentially need the most attention. And you can see that snow plowing, traffic flow, and economic development tended to, out of these services that fell in that higher importance, lower quality grid, these services tended to be of higher importance and generally of lower quality. You can see job opportunities is kind of out there, but it's kind of along the lower in importance.
Back you up to the other one. Talk a little bit about the code enforcement being down in the lower left quadrant. I mean, we generally tend to, I don't know, it's obviously not statistical, but we tend to get feedback that people value code enforcement, which would imply as a somewhat higher importance, but you're saying it's a lower importance / lower quality attribute. So help me understand.
Correct. Based on residence ratings, that's a great question, and one that potentially might need more research about. My guess would be that they're looking at all of these services relative to each other, and they can look at which services really are the most important. They're not looking at them. They do get to give a rating for each individual service, but they also get to look at, well, you know, am I going to really give code enforcement an extremely high importance rating when we have, you know, fire and police and all these others out there. So it could be that it's definitely important to those people that you hear from, but what this is telling me is that vastly across the entire population is that people feel that it's less important than the other services that the city provides.
I'm looking at the lower left. So code enforcement, if we're dealing with a lot of people in multi-unit complexes, may not be paying attention. They probably don't care about the leaf and tire recycling very much.
Mm-hmm.
They don't have a separate residence that they got to rake up the leaves and all.
Sure.
And the review process for development, they probably don't know too much or care too much about that.
Absolutely.
So it seems to me that might be reflecting a certain demographic.
That absolutely could be it. And we do have, I believe, each of the services broken out by tenure, age, all those different characteristics of demographics. So it would be interesting to look at those specifically to see if there are differences among respondent groups. Was there another question?
Were there forced choices so they could only put so many categories in each quadrant?
No, this is an analysis that we've done. The respondents weren't asked to put them in this,
Okay.
so they were asked to rate the quality, excellent, good, fair, poor of each service, and then they were asked to rate the importance, essential, very important, somewhat important, not at all important. We
So
look
you
at those two ratings, and we basically plot those points kind of in a scattergram fashion to determine in which of these four quadrants. That 72% there along the left and the 81% along the bottom, those are the median ratings among all the ratings for services. So the 72% is the median importance rating, 81% is the median quality rating. That's what gives us our four quadrants. It basically breaks the list into half.
I have a question too. Then, it kind of like what Peggy was saying, like on hazmat, I may not have any hazmat material, but I may think the program's still important. And that would be the same, I think that could be the same thing with leaves or anything else. So it isn't necessarily, do I use it? And that's how when I read surveys, that's what I'm thinking.
Well, it's hard to tell. I think getting more information.
But unless you have everybody do an essay on every question, you're never going to know for
Sure.
sure.
No, but
Right. Yes.
On this, Lori, I'm taking it that if we wanted to take some tweaking a little bit of the analysis, because the 72 and the 81 are medians among all of the groups that are shown here. But if we wanted to say, for example, take out things that are not directly city services,
Sure.
okay, where maybe it's the parks and trails are taken care of by a district. We wanted to exclude that. We could also possibly do something like excluding events.
Sure.
Like the candlelight or fireworks or something. And we could retake a look at what's important or not. Now, is there also a similar chart, I don't know how comparable most of these are, to say the Front Range?
No, we don't, not all communities ask both both importance and quality. Oftentimes, actually, most communities don't ask importance of services. What we find is that this kind of analysis is helpful, but generally when you're looking at just the ratings of importance, what we call core services are going to be at the top of the list. Fire, police, safety services, water, sewer, those kinds of things that are life-sustaining services are going to be at the top every single time, every single year. So generally they don't ask quality importance on both surveys, and we don't have, unfortunately, comparison to other communities. Although I know that Westminster asks the same question, and I know that we just finished their report, and their data they do provide online also. So they have something similar. I think that they actually have more of this scatter plot because they have a shorter list of services. It was just too challenging to get this, and we are going to be providing in the full report for each quadrant that you see on this slide. We'll provide a chart that looks like this so that you can see the relative placement of the services to each other.
In at least one instance, the median is already pretty high.
Yes.
So, if you're looking at our folks immensely dissatisfied. And the other part is, in looking at this, you're taking the responses where folks have said very or somewhat important. You're always taking the top two of what you might perceive as the positive.
Correct.
Could you talk a little bit about why emphasizing the positive and not doing an analysis on, say, the negative?
That's a great question, and generally, I think people like the positive. We definitely present all the results in the full report. These analyses, we have tended to, prior to reporting, what we call it the percent positive, prior to reporting those, I think a lot of reports that we've seen over the years are more presenting those more positive responses or combining responses so that you don't see those breakouts of individual ratings. I think it's just what people more like to hear, but you still get that difference. So you still are able to see if only 47% were saying that it was excellent or good. That means another 53% said it was fair or poor. But it's just one way to present the data and do this particular analysis, a way to aggregate it in a more usable form.
And just to make sure I understood, the range was 4 performance levels?
Correct.
The one thing I think is
is interesting is this is based on a survey of a broad reach and scope of the citizens of the city. So, for example, code, yeah, we hear from people who have an issue with code, or code hears from that. But for the most part, I mean, this says that is not an issue that has risen to the same level that we may hear it, which is what I think should help us balance what we're doing, because, you know, the squeaky wheel gets the grease, and if, you know, you get emails all month long about, you know, certain city services that are issued, but here it's not mirroring that. It doesn't mean that this is flawed. It means that you're talking to a lot more people.
Exactly. And generally, you know, people call or contact city employees or departments to complain about an issue. They don't call and say, you know, you're doing a really great job with making sure my neighbor keeps his yard clean, although that can happen.
But you can assume phone calls you don't get. The ones that aren't.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, this, and maybe you could, I could ask this question later, or I can ask it now, and you can answer it later. But I mean, sort of to your point, that you know, the other thing that could be in play on that particular question ends up being, you know, if you're in an HOA, you probably don't have a lot of code-related issues in a general sense because there's local oversight, theoretically. So how do you balance that generally? You know, we can slice and dice. The data, to me, is worthwhile because it does present information broadly that's community feedback in a way that we haven't had before. And yet, the temptation, of course, is to go in and dissect the data and try to, I mean, we're doing it now. We're having these conversations about what does this mean, why is this one in this quadrant, you know, what are the exceptions, so forth and so on. So how do other communities balance the sense of getting some information that they can use to help guide policy decisions versus the ever-popular paralysis by analysis process?
That's a great question, and I think you all are one of the most engaged councils that I've been to in a while, and I think you're asking all the right questions. And that's a compliment. It's a compliment. And so, you know, you are asking all the right questions. There are absolutely communities that get paralyzed by this. And put the results in a drawer and don't ever touch it again because even not necessarily because they were poor results, but because it is overwhelming. And one of the things that this can do is help focus on, okay, well, you know, snow plowing. You know, I had a conversation with Kelly about that, and knowing that Littleton doesn't always plow residential streets, that there are specific cases in which they will, but generally they don't, and that surrounding communities, I just had the same kind of conversation with Centennial. They are surrounded by communities that plow their streets, and residents are upset because boundaries are close and they're driving through all these communities and they get to their community and my street isn't plowed, why not? Sometimes it's, do you want to spend the time and money to do that and tell residents if they want their residential streets plowed, you know, what are they willing to give up? If that's what it takes, or is it just simply changing their perceptions? So I think you know, using the data, this is a starting point, and it definitely is going to raise more questions, and it should raise more questions. You shouldn't. Hopefully, not everything is exactly what you expected it to be, and so I definitely, you know, am here to help provide more clarification. And hopefully, once you get the full report and are able to look at those breakdowns of the data, you're going to be able to get some of these questions answered about, you know, how does the different demographic characteristics of respondents play into higher or lower ratings, and I'm definitely here to run additional analyses if council feel that that's warranted.
I do have a quick question. You may get into it a little bit further back, so
Sure.
you can answer it later. The downtown parking that goes in the lower left, earlier on, it appeared as though that seemed to be more important earlier on than it does here. Is there phraseology of the question, or is there?
It could be. So in the list of services, it was downtown parking. Later on, when we're asking about, I believe, the specific transportation availability of downtown parking was an issue. And so it could just be the phrasing. It could be because of the majority of services, the 39 services. This is a rather large list of services that, it kind of got buried in what residents felt was important as they kind of went through and selected those. But that's a great question.
My brain is kind of fried when looking at it. So the 72% mark and the 81%. What, I see median, but so when we get in this lower part, they're not all 72%. So how low down is the percentage then there?
Next flash.
What's our
Go to the next.
what's our score?
I'm not sure I'm understanding the
This
question.
is looking at the upper left. For example,
Right.
Peggy, this is looking at the upper left.
So-
And so what you see is those
Not
items.
nearly as many of these are on the other, more are on the other page than are on this one. So I
No,
guess.
this is the upper left.
This is just this upper left quadrant with the pink circle.
Okay, and then we're going to get to the lower left?
We didn't include that particular graphic in the presentation, but it will be included in the report. Each quadrant, there will actually be a graph that looks like this for each quadrant in the report. So where you can see, for those lower services, it'll go from, 0 to 72 and then 0 to 81 again.
Okay, so we'll see the range,
Mhm.
not just the median and the lower or whatever.
And I just want to point out, I have the preliminary report. It's 92 pages long. So if you're concerned that you're not going to get enough data, I think you're going to be really, those of you who are into that are going to be really into that. With every single question, you'll be able to look at, you talked about code enforcement, Bruce, you'll be able to look at length of residency. Have you lived here 10 years or less, or 10 years or more? So maybe that'll give you some information. Maybe people who've been around a long time notice code enforcement issues. You'll be able to look at whether it's renters or owners, how they answered the question. You'll be able to look at their ethnicity. So this tonight was intended as kind of a broad overview, but there's just tons more data in here that will take you, I've read it twice, and it's a lot to absorb. So I think we'll have more conversations about this as we move into the new year. But there's a lot of material here if you're concerned that there's not a lot of detail. It's here.
So since we have at least one part of our city, people who don't have very good fluency in English. So do we have a sense of how many of those people might have had some ability to provide input?
We know Hispanic versus non-Hispanic, and we know race. So we have data by race, data by ethnicity. For the survey in particular, we didn't take specific action to target those folks with less ability to speak English.
But then, if it was sent in English, then they probably weren't responding.
Correct.
If they could.
Unless there is someone else in the household, or someone in the household who speaks English, then yes, those people, if they weren't able to read the survey in English, then yes, they were most likely not responding. Sure. Another analysis that we conducted is called a key driver analysis. This is another way to look at which services may need more attention. This is analysis that's typically conducted in the private sector to see what drives consumers back to a specific product or service. And unlike the previous analysis, which uses stated importance, where residents are actually able to rate the importance of each service, this looks at the derived importance. So we look at the quality ratings of each individual service and look at ratings of the overall quality of services to see how those ratings correlate. Where people tended to give higher ratings to say, police, did they also tend to give higher ratings to the overall quality of services? Where they tended to give lower ratings to police, did they also tend to give lower ratings to overall quality of services? So this is an analysis that does not require asking the importance set of questions, which is what we do in a lot of communities. A lot of communities in the Front Range have this analysis conducted and are provided with this action chart, which summarizes not only the key services from that analysis, the services that correlate most highly with ratings of overall quality of services, but also summarizes your comparison to the national benchmark. And once the city surveys residents again, provides another survey administration, we'll be able to provide trend data to show arrows where maybe ratings of economic development increased and parking increased but snow plowing decreased, that kind of thing, to provide a third dimension of performance. So here you can see that out of that key driver analysis, parks and trails, the library, the museum, the police department, and neighborhood and community services were identified as those services that are most influential in resident ratings of the overall quality of services. All of those services, except for neighborhood and community services, which we did not have a benchmark comparison available, were rated much above the benchmark. So each of these areas may be areas where the city is obviously doing really well, and areas where you want to maintain those high quality ratings in order to maintain your high overall quality of services.
So, and again, this is just trying to understand some of the nuance. You had indicated early on, all right, potential projects, taking an active role in redevelopment of aging shopping centers.
I don't.
Oh, wait.
We haven't gotten there yet.
I went backwards, I'm sorry.
No, that's okay.
Well, somewhere in here, one of the concerns, for example, was job growth. All right,
Yes,
job growth,
yes.
business retention, business attraction were the most pressing issues, but yet the economic development attribute up there is indicated as not a key driver and also above benchmark. So again, help me understand what that confluence of items actually implies.
So where people say one of the most pressing issues is job growth versus their ratings of the economic development, and it not turning out to be one of the drivers?
A key driver, but it's identified as being above benchmark.
Well, there are oftentimes a lot of services that get higher ratings. The benchmark ratings don't play into it being a key driver. It's that individual services rating and how it correlates to the rating given to overall quality of services, so that green bar at the very top. So just because people selected jobs growth as one of the most pressing issues, maybe they don't associate jobs growth with economic development, and that's why it has a higher rating and it is, above the benchmark.
But let me see if I understand this, Lori. So
Sure.
we had a lot of folks that said overall quality of Littleton services is very good.
Yes.
I mean, I'll paraphrase a little bit. And it's the 5 items that have keys attached to them. There's a high correlation between high ratings for those and folks that rated high overall. Is that, am I kind of getting?
Or low. If residents tended to give higher ratings or lower ratings to parks and trails, they were also likely to give a similar rating to the overall quality of services.
Okay, so the correlation is, however they rated the overall services, the key drivers were ones that were similarly responded to.
Right.
So the high correlation there.
Correct.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
And did I answer your question?
I think so.
Okay. If we can come back to it.
I think I understand what you're saying, and it bears noodling on it.
Sure. So we did ask some specific questions about transportation and travel in Littleton. Again, generally residents gave ratings that were much higher than what we see in other communities. And we did not have benchmark comparisons for the light rail stations, as well as the omnibus and shopping cart van service, but you can see that generally residents felt positively. That label at the bottom is a little challenging to see. Percent. These are percents, excellent and good. And I did want to point out, Mayor Brinkman, this is the set of questions. We aren't seeing 4 of the items that were asked on this this question in particular. Street maintenance, ease of traveling by bus, traffic congestion, and availability of parking downtown were also asked along with these other questions, and they received somewhat lower ratings between 66% and 34%, excellent or good. We also asked a set of questions specifically about the quality of various aspects of services provided by the Bemis Library. Generally, residents who had interactions with the library tended to give higher ratings. Again, these are the proportions of respondents who did not select don't know. At least 29% of respondents said that they didn't know when rating the quality of each of these services. So those responses have been removed from this analysis here. So we're looking at those who gave a rating, those who had an opinion. 94% felt that the programs were excellent or good, the services of the library were excellent or good, and the library facility, 89% felt it was excellent or good. And these ratings tended to be much above or above the national benchmark comparison. A similar question about the Littleton Museum and the services it provides was asked. Again, at least 40% of respondents selected don't know when answering each of these questions. There were a total of 7 questions that we asked specifically. 8 questions that we asked specifically about the museum. But generally, those who had interactions or felt knowledgeable enough to provide a response gave very positive ratings to the museum and its services. We also wanted to know what respondents felt about the city government performance, identifying where they typically get information about the city, and helping to prioritize city goals. Yes?
Could you back up a second? To both the library and the museum, the percentages of people, but I'm thinking particularly on the museum, you said 40%, something like that, didn't know or whatever?
40% or more for each item that we asked about. There were a total of 8 said don't know when responding.
Okay, which means 60% sort of knew. Or
Yes,
knew a lot.
yes, gave a rating.
It strikes me that the way that you said I forget the way you described how you do it, a given segment of the population that you're surveying responded or didn't, and you extrapolate that out. So let's just pretend that only one person in a given demographic responded. That would inflate a bit, perhaps, how many people actually do use or go to the museum or to the library or whatever. That one might be a little more sensitive in that extrapolation, I think, than some of the other.
Sure, for that one respondent, yes. If when we weight the survey data,
Yeah.
yes, that would absolutely make a difference if it was a single person who was meant to represent 1,000.
And did not see the survey, but I was told that it said that, if you don't want to answer it, you can give it to somebody else in the household. Was it something like that?
We use a method called the birthday method to select without bias a respondent within the household. The thought behind the birthday method is we ask the adult 18 or over in the household who most recently had a birthday to complete the survey. And the thought is that there is no correlation between ratings given by people on different birthdays or the same birthdays. So it's one of many methods that you can use to randomly select. It's one that's commonly used among survey researchers and that we used on our survey.
We know for sure that person is in the
We don't. We're relying on them to follow the instructions. And so we trust that people most often will follow those instructions, but because it's a mail survey, it's a survey they complete on their own time, we can't say for sure if that person did. It's just one attempt at another way to help generalize the results.
You have also stated that you have a margin of error of plus or minus on this, so.
Sure.
The 3.
Yep, absolutely. So looking at the city government, we asked respondents to assess 17 different aspects of the local government. Here we're looking at the 5 performance areas where respondents gave the highest excellent or good ratings. Between 25 and 45% did select don't know when rating the various aspects of their city government. Those who had an opinion gave very positive ratings to the direction the city's taking regarding open space trails and parks, quality of work by city employees, public meetings about city plans, the overall direction, 69% said was excellent or good, as well as the city manager's management of city operations was deemed excellent or good by 69% of respondents, and each of these items were considered much above the national and Front Range benchmark comparisons. Excuse me.
Lori, how did the don't know compare?
The don't know compared to the Front Range? We actually don't have a benchmark for don't knows. It's a very interesting idea. But generally, in my experience, this list is about 3 times longer than a lot of other lists about aspects of city government and rating city government than other communities have provided. And generally, there's very high don't knows. As I'm sure you're aware, there's a very select group of residents who tend to interact with the government and elected officials, and so most people feel that they can't answer these questions.
Yes, I mean, sometimes folks' only contact with the city happens to be through the police department and the courts. Were any of our responses in this section of selecting talking about how do the courts operate?
In the city services, we ask about courts, and so they're able to rate it there, and generally we find courts tend to get lower ratings, but it's likely because people don't like to go to the court because they're there for something they shouldn't have been doing.
Maybe you should do coffee and pastries.
That's a great question, though. We provided respondents with a list of various sources of information and asked them in the last 12 months how they got information about the city. This was on a scale where they could choose a frequency, never 1 to 3 times in the last year, to get information about the city. The Littleton report, the bi-monthly newsletter, 70% of respondents had reported using that at least once in the last 12 months prior to the survey. The Denver Post, the website, and the Littleton Independent also received more frequent use to get information about the city than some of the other sources that we listed.
Not as popular on Channel 8 as we think we are.
We also wanted to gauge residents' perspectives about the level of effort the city should put towards each of the city council goals. We listed out the 7 goals. We did provide, these are abbreviated labels, we did provide a brief sentence or so, a description about what each of these goals include on the survey, so that respondents who were unfamiliar were able to say, this is what this means. We wanted to know if they felt the city should be applying more effort, the same level of effort, or less effort in each of these areas. Generally, residents were pretty satisfied with the current level of effort that's being given towards each of these goals, with between 47% and 65% saying that the same effort should continue to be applied towards each. The balanced and sustainable local economy had the highest proportion of respondents saying that more effort needed to be applied. 48% had indicated that more effort needed to be applied there. And generally, looking at those don't knows, about 1/4 of respondents selected don't know when determining the amount of effort to be applied toward assuring financially sound city government. For the other items, it was less than 20%.
So we can extrapolate from this that we're doing a lot better than the U.S. Congress.
then I'll let you say that. That's I'm not going to be on record saying that. But yeah, it seems to me that generally residents are pretty satisfied with their current level of services. So we did ask about a number of potential projects and initiatives that the city could do in the next few years. Respondents were asked to think about the next 5 to 8 year period and to rate the importance of 10 potential projects in Littleton. Here we're looking at the 6 that were deemed the most important, essential, or very important by respondents. Those considered to be less important, that are not included here on the slide, were related to open space and trails, preservation of historic buildings, and programs for immigrants, where less than half felt that these projects were essential or very important. We also wanted to gauge respondents' level of support for the city implementing practices or programs that would help improve the environment. So we can see the 3 most supported and the 3 least supported. This was a scale of strongly support, somewhat oppose, and strongly oppose. And generally, for all of the items, respondents voiced strong support, with at least 3/4 supporting each. Some of the items that aren't shown on the slide that we asked about were creating incentives for builders to use environmentally friendly construction methods, with 84% supporting, encouraging community gardening or farming, 84% support, improving bicycle mobility, 83% support, and increasing environmental education and public awareness programs, 82% supported that. So these are some conclusions that I have drawn from the survey results. I know that council and staff know better about where resources can be spent, services that may or may not need improving, and also have a wealth of other data that they can use to support the survey results. And so these are my takeaways. Feel free to question them. Feel free to challenge them. And definitely feel free to draw your own conclusions from the results. There are many things to be highlighted. The ones that I felt stood out were the overall quality of life and community in the city. Safety of the community, residents felt very safe, and the high ratings given to city services, particularly when compared to other communities, ratings given by residents in other communities. Some areas for opportunity, economic development and jobs. This is one that is an opportunity in most every community these days. And it doesn't necessarily mean that you're doing a bad job. It just means that people are noticing what's going on around them, and that they would like the city to help increase efforts in these areas. Snow plowing is another area where it seems like residents feel that there could be some attention paid with a relatively lower rating, as well as having comparisons much below both the national and front range benchmarks. I know that Colorado, with our mild winters we've been having, people are still just unpleasant about snow plowing. They're unhappy because, and I think Kelly pointed out wisely, is that my street in front of my house is not plowed when I go out of my driveway, and that's what I want. So it's, again, balancing the expense of doing that and or changing residents' expectations of what service levels the city does provide. The other item is parking downtown. It was the second lowest rated service and much below the benchmarks, and it did receive the lowest rating among the various aspects of transportation. And although it was in that lower importance, lower quality quadrant, perhaps putting more resources towards this service or improving parking downtown could have an impact on economic development and people's desire to go downtown and spend money there. So these are just some of the highlights that I've concluded, but I'm happy to answer any other questions, and you can be done with me.
Lori, on interpreting the survey and taking it to something that maybe a city might want to do something about, there's different ways to comb through the data and try and sort out what is important and possibly actionable. What are some of the best practices that you've seen, because I'm assuming you're interested in what happens with your work after What have you seen as some of the best practices in combing through and then determining something that's actionable?
That's a great question. And honestly, we always ask our clients to share with us, what are you doing with your results? Because we have clients, first-time clients, that want to know how this is great data, this is information we want to use, how do we use it? And a lot of times it's meetings with staff, it's getting other data from other sources, seeing how it relates. Okay, well, 56% gave poor ratings to snow plowing, but other data we have shows that we plowed all these streets within this amount of time, and after this, amount of time after a storm, and that means that we did a good job there. So maybe it's simply changing perceptions, but they incorporate it into their budget documents a lot of times. They create performance measures to follow with strategic planning, and I am happy to send you some examples that we've collected that show how the citizen survey results have been incorporated into those kinds of planning documents and processes. But it's definitely, there are some communities, I know Westminster is another example of a client that I know does this kind of planning. I believe there's a Front Range consortium of communities. Westminster, I know, is part of that, and I think that that's a great tool, especially for an area like this. Front Range jurisdictions, compared to other communities across the country, tend to be far and above others. And so it's a challenge to improve when you already have these high ratings. And so I think learning from what others have been doing in that kind of a way, that consortium, I think, would be a valuable tool in your planning process. But I'm happy to send along some examples that we've had from our clients who've used their data and incorporate those.
Thank you, Lori. Very good information. We were anxious to read the whole thing.
Well, we'll get that to you very soon. I just got to get those figures in there, and then...
Okay, council, we'll take a 5-minute break and be back here at 6:20.
I was like...
Okay, we will get started again. Very thrilled and honored to have Paul Washington here. Thank you, Paul, so much for coming back. Paul's the economic development director for the city of Denver. And when we had our economic development symposium, Paul started to introduced us to the 7 Pillars program that Denver has developed, and it is a fascinating and interesting discussion on how to be, I think, very complete and comprehensive, and including the community and all of the different goals and objectives from all the different stakeholders, and how you guys have incorporated that and how you're putting it to work. So thank you so much for coming back. You're just fresh off the airplane was it yesterday you were in Japan?
No, last week, but
Oh, okay.
it feels like yesterday.
Yeah, exactly. You're just finally getting back on mountain time.
That's right. That's exactly correct.
So, Paul, I'm going to go ahead and just let you get started.
Sure.
And as you go along, you may see a council member's hand pop
Absolutely.
up if you want to go ahead and entertain some questions.
Okay.
And we'll just kind of, see how we go with it.
Sure, yeah,
Okay.
and so I brought enough hard copies, and I'm happy to leave any of them behind, of the economic development strategy for 2012. It's called Jumpstart 2012. So I thought what will be most effective is to just flip pages, and I can kind of run through some of the highlights of what we've been up to, and obviously if you have any questions, please raise your hand, and I'll be happy to answer them. I'm going to do 2 things before I really get into the strategy. I thought it would be interesting just to, since we're so late into the year, and this is a 1-year strategy, I thought I would just jump to the conclusion. I'm sure you're all interested as to what we actually got done. And so I'll read, and I'm just going to read these very quickly, of the accomplishments that we have been able to achieve in 2012. And then I'll go in more depth and explain them, because some of these will be acronyms, but as we flip pages, I'll come back to a more in-depth description. So first and foremost, we, in terms of our accomplishments, we developed and implemented a very aggressive economic development strategy called Jumpstart 2012, which is before you. Through the year, we have been able to recruit and retain 8 major companies, which resulted in over 1,700 jobs to the Denver economy. That's with a business incentive fund of about $500,000. And so we've been very, very excited about our business retention and recruitment efforts. Yes, ma'am.
So were all of those initiated this year, or some have seeds in prior?
I'm taking full credit for everything.
Thank you.
As you should.
Yeah, they were all initiated and accomplished in 2012. There may have been one smaller deal that was initiated maybe my first or second day on the job, but most of these were 1-year efforts.
And Paul, when you talked about the 500,000
Yes.
in incentives, at some point in time, will you get a little bit
Absolutely.
more into the detail on the
Very
breakdown
quickly.
of those?
Very quickly. We established a lease expiration database. I'll explain that in a little bit as well. We also manage a loan portfolio that's federally funded. When I started with the agency, which was about a year and a few weeks ago, we had a default rate of about 18%. And I've been doing loan workouts. I don't know how much you know about my background, probably very little, but I come from a finance and legal background, so these painful workouts are right up my alley. But we've been very diligent on those and have brought down that default rate by well over 50%. We've repurposed our business development reps to become industry experts. Again, I'll explain these in a little bit more detail. We've also developed and presented a housing task force recommendation to the mayor, which will set our housing policy for the foreseeable future. We were able to obtain about $1.5 million of federal grants outside of our traditional federal funding. We published a business capital matrix, I'll explain that as well. A GIS investment mapping tool, which I'm really excited about, and I'll talk about that. We hosted a citywide business plan competition, that was about a month ago, and I'll go into that in a little bit more detail. We've established a cash flow loan program for our subcontractors. Again, descriptions will follow. A concessionaire loan program in collaboration with the Denver International Airport. We've increased our defined selection pool, which is in essence a pool of contracts that are only available for small business enterprises as defined by the federal government. That pool was increased from $4 million to $9 million. So in other words, opening up an additional $5 million of market for our small business contractors. And we've had two very successful housing projects. The Colfax Renaissance Project in collaboration with the Colorado Coalition for the Homeless. That resulted in 101 rental units for the 30 to 50% AMI population. These are the very poor. We also committed in that project $5.2 million of federal funding through the NSP program and the home program, and that was levered up in that $19 million project. So we invested about $5 million on a $19 million project, and that's been a huge success and has catalyzed the development efforts on the West Colfax corridor. We've also completed the Aria Marycrest project in collaboration with the Denver Urban Renewal Authority, as well as Perry Rose and Urban Ventures, and my good friend Sue Powers. That resulted in 430 rental and for sale units, and the Office of Economic Development committed an additional $4.6 million in NSP and Skyline funds towards that $80 million project. So we're very happy with how that investment was levered up. If you could please turn to page 9 of the Jumpstart 2012 brochure. And I did this before, but I don't know how many of you were in the initial discussion. I thought I would just spend a few moments to kind of run you through how each one of these pillars are structured. There are 7 pillars in our mind to economic development. And so you'll see each one of these pillars represented from pages 9 throughout. Those 7 pillars are business retention, business recruitment, small business advocacy, sustainable neighborhood development, business lending, key strategic projects, and workforce development. And so as we flip pages, I'll highlight some of the initiatives under each one of those pillars. But those are the 7 pillars in which we focus our economic development efforts. Yes, sir.
And so, Paul, how'd you choose the 7 pillars, and how much of it came from staff, how much it came in conjunction with the business community, how much of it came in conjunction with the citizens?
Excellent question. And so a couple of things. So we have different departments within the agency, and so that obviously represented some of our pillars. I come from a finance background, so business retention and business recruitment were just fundamental to my prior career. So those are naturals. We had a business loan pool. As I mentioned, it needed some work out, and so that was a natural. Key strategic projects is a catch-all for those projects that don't necessarily fit neatly within a particular pillar, but have huge economic impacts. And so that's kind of how we triangulated, if you will, into the 7 pillars.
You had departments or you had portfolios.
That's right.
Kind of said, hey, we're going to coalesce some thoughts here and at least give us some ability to do some logical groupings.
That's exactly right. And then it's worth noting that I took this job, I agreed to take this job probably in early September, and I started in late October. And so from early September, before I was on the payroll, literally through probably the last couple weeks in December, I met with everybody. I'm serious. I just met with anyone that I felt had some IQ to lend to the equation. So obviously the mayor, city council, my staff, members of the community, developers, I mean, you name it.
Talk to Phil?
I did not talk to Phil, but I think Phil was out of town or something like that. But my point is that I would meet as I do now, and I would have a napkin or a piece of paper, and if I can do anything, I can recognize a good idea, and so I would just jot them down seriously, and I did that for 200 or so odd meetings. And then when it came time to start to develop this economic development strategy, I pulled out a banker's box and just start flipping through my notes and say, oh, it's a great idea. And then things would resonate. You'd hear these ideas just continually coming from different stakeholders. And so that, to me, was even a stronger signal that I got to put that into the plan.
So you were doing the sifting.
Absolutely, absolutely. And then obviously, this is maybe a 15 iteration document, so I would draft it, send it to my team, they would cut it up, send a draft to the mayor, he would cut it up, and it just kind of got to a point where we felt comfortable with the document. So it really came to coalesce that way. We will do this every year. I'm in the strategic thinking mode now. The pillars won't change. Some of the strategic initiatives might, and the initiatives will. So it really kind of came together in that fashion.
And I know you used the euphemism that you met with everyone. You said 200 meetings. You were new to town. How'd you get that?
Good question. I didn't go too much into the budget, but this agency is about 300 persons and $70 million, and nothing like $70 million to get you some friends. I had to make a few phone calls, right? A lot of people were trying to figure out who I was. I'm from Denver. It's worth noting I was born and raised in Denver, and so a lot of the players I had known most of my career. I practiced law for a number of years in Denver as well. So I had 17th Street covered. I do live in Boulder, and most of my practice for the last decade has been international. So there was a lot of meeting people for the first time and that type of thing. I was trying to be funny, but the reality is a lot of people were saying, who's this guy? And let's reach out to him. And I used my network to get those 200 meetings. So just briefly on the format, and then we can start to flip pages. So if you look at page 8 on the left, and again, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, so on and so forth, they all speak to the pillar. And so business retention, again, based on my background, is much easier to keep a customer than to get a new one. So business retention is by no mistake the first pillar. But if you look at the left, what we tried to do in each one of these pillars, and I'll use business retention as an example, you'll see some language underneath the caption on the left side of the fold-out. And in each instance, in each pillar, what we tried to do is we tried to set forth the data, the challenge that Denver faces with respect to that pillar. And then we tried to identify the programmatic solutions to that challenge. And throughout that text, you'll hear and see us argue why we even care about business retention. I mean, there are a lot of things we could be thinking about from an economic development standpoint. So part of the effort was I was challenging myself and my staff to make the argument, well, why do we care about business retention? I mean, it's intuitive, but sometimes they're not. And so you'll see that argument. Why we care, what's the challenge to Denver, what are the programmatic solutions? And then if you look to the right-hand side of the page, you'll see this exact same format on each pillar. And these are the descriptions of the detailed descriptions of the programmatic solutions we talk about on the left side. And so in each pillar, we come up with 3 strategic initiatives, and that's in the bold blue on the top of each box. Every pillar has 3 strategic initiatives. Underneath each one of those initiatives are the actual steps, or the milestones, rather, to accomplish that strategic initiative. Another document, which I didn't bring because of its length, but I'll mention it, is in conjunction with this plan, we have broken each one of these bullet points down into their component steps. Sometimes it's 1 step, sometimes it's 15. And so we have created a tool that has each step to each initiative of each pillar in a database. And beside that step is the individual who's responsible for the execution of that step. And then they, and we have asked them, what week in the month of 2012 will you have this step accomplished? And what that enables us to do is, with the push of a button, I can query every single step that I'm responsible for or any of my staff in 2012. And I could say how many, where should they be right now? And then as they accomplish that, they go into the database and say accomplished or in progress or what have you.
So at this point in time, you're going through the list and you're figuring out who's been naughty and who's been nice.
That's right. That's exactly right. And Santa Claus is certainly focused on that. But we do that at every staff meeting. And I'll query the document, and literally it's a push of a button, and it just bloop, bloop, bloop. And then I can show every step that's been accomplished or every step that hasn't been accomplished and who, and we can have that discussion. And that allows us to manage the execution of this relatively aggressive strategy. And so that's a tool that I'm very proud of, and it really keeps the moving parts in check, if you will. And so if you look at, yes?
Just real briefly, how has your staff reacted to that?
They don't, it's tough. They don't, so we have a director's meeting, and then we have a senior staff meeting. And, the senior staff meeting, I'm going to call it 40 persons, and the director's meeting is about 7 to 10. Okay? So the directors, I think, are managing the process more so than executing the specific steps for the most part. The senior staff really are the persons who are executing these steps. And so I used to have senior staff meetings. I'd print out my report, and I would go around the room, and I would just check the list and call people out, and they didn't like it. And so what's been more effective is just having one-on-one meetings. And so, and I give that responsibility to their direct supervisor, and so, and they hold the supervisor accountable for managing the process. That seems to work a lot better. And this is an aggressive strategy. I thought if I got 70-80% of this done, I thought that would be a good year. And so, in everyone's defense, I think if we had accomplished everything in this strategy, I would have been surprised. But we wanted it aggressive, we wanted it innovative, and we wanted it forward-thinking, so that we could wake the agency up. And I think as we look forward, one of the things I don't think I did a very good job of is explaining how these pillars are so interconnected. I think if you play inside baseball, you get it. But if you're a couple steps removed and you're a frontline employee in a workforce development department, that's a more difficult task. And so going forward, we need to really be better at explaining why your workforce center efforts help business retention or business recruitment, so that the messaging filters all the way down to the front level and people become energized by the strategy and not burdened by it. And that's something we'll focus on going forward. Yes, sir.
Well, a question, great process. Are you using like a wall, a war board, or a smart board, or what are you all looking at
In terms of the...
when you have your meetings? And your task that you're assigned?
It's around robin. I have a report. I encourage them to print out their own reports. You can do that by pillar, by initiative, or by individual. And we should just do round robin, and I would just pick a section and just kind of figure out where people were. I think we've switched to, we switched to reporting out. I would just bring individuals in the senior staff to report out what they do. For instance, on business retention, my chief economist presented, this is how I price out what is a reasonable allocation of business incentive funds to recruit a company, just so people can understand what other folks do and understand that there's a lot of sophisticated work going on. It allows that person to really shine in front of their colleagues, that type of thing. And that's been going okay, but I think where we're switching focus now is we are picking areas, initiatives that need focus, and then instead of having 40 senior staff people just kind of listen to a report or be held accountable to the spreadsheet, what we're doing is we're bringing a smaller group of 7 or 8 together that have some input or way to affect a specific initiative, and then we'll have that discussion. at a smaller level. And that 7 or 8 senior staff member group is picked based upon what we're trying to accomplish. And so we bring them together that way. That also helps them understand how they impact other pillars, things like that.
And that's your 7 directors managing the process.
Absolutely, always. Always. And, you know, if you look at each one of the 3 strategic initiatives, there is an individual assigned to that specific strategic initiative, and then there's an individual assigned to the bold print, as well as the individual steps on the bullet. So it really kind of filters at the top all the way down. But I'm asking the person who's in charge of outreach campaign the questions, where are your employees in terms of the execution of it?
Thank you very much.
So business retention. And so the other thing I'll just point out briefly is you have the milestones. Underneath the milestones are the outcomes that we intend to accomplish, and then at the far bottom are the partners that we have engaged to help accomplish the particular strategic initiatives. And so we try to hold ourselves accountable on those outcomes, and then identify who we want to partner with going forward. And so we'll do the same effort for 2013. And again, in the interest of time, I'm not going to go through all of these. I just want to point out some that I've already mentioned, and then build on some others. So if you look at the outreach campaign, one of the efforts that I'm very proud about is we have developed a lease expiration database. And that has come about really in 3 ways. First and foremost, we have purchased a software program. There are a number of them out there. Many are used by sophisticated brokers. And, you know, there are a lot of people out there on the street just tracking leases as they get signed and as they expire. And you can buy that for a very pretty penny. And we've done that. The other way we are affecting this is we have engaged a strategic relationship with our largest commercial brokers and our largest landowners. And we just had dinner last night as part of this strategy. I think it's mentioned in here. We brought them all together, table about this size, and just asked them questions about, you know, what the city could be doing better, and how we could be more of a strategic partner with these very important people. We had a group that controls, according to them, about 65% of the downtown Denver market. And so, you know, those are important people to know as these leases come up for expiration. This database also prompts those discussions. And the whole purpose is every month I have a report, and I can show you what large employers' leases coming up this year, next year, in 2015. And that ding, 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 right, I'm writing that person, I'm calling them, I'm having a meeting with them because I don't want to play catch-up. When they have to make that really critical decision. Do I expand in Denver? Do I leave Denver? Do I contract in Denver? And we want to just be proactive in those discussions. And so moving left to right, so I talked a little bit about the landlord and commercial brokers establishing those strategic relationships. We will continue to do a lot more of that. One other effort that I think has been very attractive, the brokers were saying last night, you know, if you're writing these large companies when their leases are about to expire, you're way too late. And luckily, I understand that. And so one of the things that we've been doing since the beginning of the year is we queried the top 30 employers and then the top 15 largest business owners. And I just wrote them a personal letter, signed it myself, said, hey, new to this job, love to have coffee with you. I can drag the mayor out if you think that's appropriate. Just want to sit down, learn more about your business, and really, again, just start to thank them for being in Denver and figure out if there are issues that we can address. And it's always, I got a busted street lamp in the alley that no one wants to fix. Just that small stuff that, you know, if you're on it, you can start to build goodwill. So when you do talk to them about that lease expiration, it doesn't look so planned. And then to the far right, the other thing that I quickly noticed is a lot of the business retention efforts are not are come about because you're at a dinner party or you're meeting with someone who is in the know, and they'll tell you, hey, you know, just so you know, I heard such and such company is thinking about expanding or leaving or what have you. And then it sets me off in a tizzy, and I go focus on that. So we have these very sophisticated employees called business development reps, or BDRs. And you heard me mention in our accomplishments. The first thing I did is I looked at I think there are about 8 industries that we are strong in. All the natural suspects, energy and finance and professional services, so on and so forth. And then so I took these 4 business development reps and said, you will become a player in 2 industries in 2 years. And they've been doing white papers. They had to identify all the industry trade groups that they need to join and just immerse themselves in that industry, because I need them to be at that dinner party and say, hey, guess what? Guess who's leaving? Guess who's coming to town? And so to do that, they need to become serious players in their industries. So not only join these industry trade groups, but eventually become leaders in these industry trade groups. And so they're off on that whole effort. And that's going to be very important so that we have people at the front line to have a finger on the pulse of industries that are critical to our economy. So the next pillar is small business advocacy. Small business represents about 88%, don't quote me on that, I think it's 82 to 88% of all companies in Denver. They represent a significant component to all jobs in Denver. And by all research that we can get our hands on, the emergence out of the recession will be driven by small business hiring. And so we focus on small business for those reasons, among many. And so one of the efforts, and again, same thing, the litany on the left, the pillar, the initiatives on the right. One of the pillars, the initiatives rather, that I'm very proud of is our capital matrix. We announced this capital matrix during Startup Denver Week, which is mid-October. This was an effort of about 4 months. And what we were able to do is, we subscribed to some services that track these things. But in essence, we identified every single institutional investor and lender to any company in Colorado over the last 5 years. And we've segmented those as to where they appear on the balance sheet. So everything from angel capital to venture capital to mezzanine lending to senior lending are identified. There are over 250 capital sources in this capital matrix. And the whole point is, if you're looking for capital, you might as well start with someone who's already done a deal in Denver. And it tells you what industry and all the contact information, and we will build upon that matrix. But that was a big effort. Again, I come from a finance background. Anytime I was hired to raise capital, that was the very first thing I did is try to figure out who gave money to a similar situated business, and that would be the first place I would start to go raise the money. So I felt this tool would be helpful for the small business community. Yes, sir.
Yeah, no, this one's absolutely fascinating because, we've collectively, we're going through the economic development process, but honestly, access to capital is just, we don't talk about it a lot, but it just seems, in retrospect, a light bulb kind of thing. It's like, obviously, you have to have capital sources. So, given that this group of funding sources is very fluid, people come and go, how do you guys stay on top of this? How do you actually figure out what the best mechanism for a particular business is? So is it angel, is it VC, is it mezzanine? What's the best fit? I understand your background. And then how do you guys hold hands to get it to closure? Are you involved through the process, or you just make entree?
That's a great question. And so one of the other initiatives that I'll talk a little bit about is we have been working for the last 9 months on what I call the Masters CDFI initiative. And then it's a long-winded way to get to a short question, but I'll get there. And so CDFI stand for Community Development Financial Institutions. They're basically nonprofit agencies that are lending to small businesses when many times banks do not. And so one of the things that they struggle with in Denver is that many of the CDFIs are very small. They manage anywhere from 3 to as much as 12 million of capital, which in the scheme of things is not a lot of money, and they cannot do a lot of lending or deals because of that. And partly, and part of the constraint is that because they're so small and because they're so narrowly focused, they don't garner the attention of national funders of CDFIs. Primarily, CDFIs get their capital by getting low-interest loans from commercial banks and foundations. Commercial banks give these loans because they have Community Reinvestment Act obligations, or CRA. That's the federal mandate that they must lend into disenfranchised communities because of all the redlining they were doing back in the, in the heyday. And so they have these obligations to stay right-sided with the feds. Foundations also give loans and grants to these CDFIs because they want to see economic development occur in areas that they are concerned about, whether that's education or middle-skill jobs, what have you. So what we found is that our CDFIs don't play at a national level because they're just kind of very myopic. So what we've been trying to do is demonstrate some leadership and come up with a strategy that is attractive at a national level so that we can raise more capital so that we can then have that capital available to small businesses through the CDFIs. And how we've gone about that is we have the city has an organization called Development Council. It's basically all the agency heads, including myself. And through a wholly unrelated exercise, we identified about 17 areas in Denver that are going through development activity over the next decade. So things that you probably are thinking of already: the Stock Show area, or Five Points, or Stapleton, or Aerotropolis, right? And then to name a few. We've also then queried of those areas which ones are adjacent to transit corridors and have the most economic development upside. And so we came up with 3 areas. And so what we're doing now is, what we've done now rather, is then in those 3 areas we looked at, well, what industries are existing in those 3 areas or we think should exist in those 3 areas, right? And so it's it's healthcare, energy, and logistics, to name 3 of the top ones. Of those 3 industries that are in these geographic areas that are of focus to Denver, that are adjacent to high transit, how many, where are the middle skill jobs in those industries? That's important because the foundations who I just mentioned who invest in these CDFIs care about that. They want to see that you're providing meaningful job opportunities to disenfranchised communities, and by definition, you don't want them to have to go get an MBA to participate. So you were talking about things like healthcare assistants, executive secretaries, persons like that. So that's our strategy. We want a loan program that goes into certain geographic areas that the city is already committed to developing, that are adjacent to transit, that have a prevalence of industries that provide middle skill jobs. And this loan program will be for that. You want to grow or establish a manufacturing plant in Sun Valley, we've got a low interest loan for you. And then in addition to that loan, we will couple that with workforce development resources. We get federal funds for that purpose. So you want to get a loan for a new piece of equipment, we'll then put some wage subsidies to help train employees on that new piece of equipment. We're also going to loan for wraparound services that we feel are important to develop these communities, such as healthy food, so maybe a grocery store or a daycare facility or a charter school. And so you can start to see this will resonate with foundations. This will resonate with the federal government, which has a matching grant program for CDFIs, and we can then start to play at a national level. What we found is that we've been querying all these companies in these industries to ask them, have you been having trouble getting access to capital? And what we've been learning is about 15% of them say, yeah, that's their biggest problem. Guess what 40% say? How do I get customers? Guess what 20% say? How do I come up with a strategy so that if I can get this loan, I can be effective at utilizing it. Do I need a loan? Can I get equity? Can I get a mezzanine? You know, that type of technical solution. And so this loan program, the way it's shaping up is if we're successful to develop this fund, what we'll ask these companies to do, and what the banks have been saying, is we've got plenty of cash, the credit sucks, right? These borrowers are coming to us with 450 credit scores, or they don't have any strategic thinking. And so we'll put these companies that want to do work in these areas through these technical resources, and at the end of that, then they will be eligible for these low-cost loans. And so that's that was a long way to answer your question, but that's exactly what we're seeing, is that there's a gap, a technical gap in borrowers that we have to address so that when they do access capital, they'll know what to do with it.
I mean, the magnitude of what you just described there is impressive. How many people do you have working that program? I mean, that seems like a full-time program for 50 people.
It probably is, but I think there's been 4 people working on this in earnest over almost a year period. Thursday, I will have a meeting with the commercial banking community that I had the very first day on my job, frankly. And so the mayor at that, I remember him distinctly calling me up at home and saying, go in there and tell those banks they need to start lending to our small businesses. Right? You put a foot in that arse. And that's exactly what I tried to do. And they said, hey, buddy, we have tons of money. We'd love to loan this money out. Right? We're swimming in cash. But the credit, the borrowers are not where they need to be. And so a year later, my hard head has now gotten that. And so we need to increase capital, but we also need to increase the sophistication of the borrower, and we will do that. So yeah, it's been mind-numbing work, and hopefully we'll be successful.
Last question on that, I don't want to belabor it, but it sounds that you guys have, to the extent that you guys have really plowed the field here, this would be expertise that could be applied regionally.
Absolutely. You're absolutely right. I think this is a $100 million loan fund, and I think it's a regional loan fund at its maturation. Absolutely, no doubt about it.
Okay.
We need to figure this out and run a pilot, and then I think this can blow up to be a much bigger thing, and it will be.
Let's talk.
Yeah, absolutely. And well, wish me luck. I gotta get the line.
You need a bigger foot.
Well, a little luck, but I think we're in good shape. I think we've done our homework, and I think we're in very good shape there. Quickly, so the other thing that I'm very proud to announce is our citywide business plan competition. Very small program, huge impact. We just announced this again during Denver Startup Week. We gave a $50,000 grant to the first prize winner of our business plan competition. And we had well over 150 applicants. We pared that down into 10 Innovation Award winners. And then we had 3 of those 10 present to a panel, a very distinguished panel. And the first prize was a $50,000 grant from our agency. They got 40 hours of free legal services from Paulsonelli, a top law firm. They got 40 hours of tax and accounting advice from Deloitte. They also got another 40 hours of free advice from a strategic marketing firm, as well as 40 hours of social marketing advisory services. Just built a whole suite of services around this business plan competition winner. But it really wasn't about that. As hard as that was to obtain, it just put a huge amount of focus on small businesses. And that was the whole purpose, is just to shine a light on the startup and small business community in Denver, and I think we accomplished that through this program. And it also, I interviewed the top 20 placers, and I think about 4 or 5 of them, we were able to give them other resources, whether through our business lending program, through our fresh food financing initiatives, or what have you, because there were just some great ideas and that we were able to help. So I was very, very excited and happy about how that program ended up. And we hope to do that again in the future. And that was all privately funded. The 50K was not taxpayer money or federal money. It was privately funded, and I think it had a big impact. Business recruitment is the third pillar. Again, same format. One of the areas that we've been working on a lot is to develop a retail strategy. Retail is about 56% of our tax base, and so I think downtown Denver needs a lot of focus here. We need more destination retail. I grew up in Denver. My mom would always drag me downtown to get my Easter suit or what have you. And we've lost that. It's just no longer a destination retail, and that's a shame. And I hope to fix that. It's going to be. We've got a homeless situation there. We've got a crime situation that needs to be addressed. But we also need, I think, a comprehensive policy and strategy. And we've just RFP'd for a consultant to help us through that. I've assembled a top-notch committee that will then take the information we get from the consultant and help us, advise us on a retail strategy. And we will execute that in 2013 and hopefully address key areas in Denver from a retail standpoint. Some other major initiatives under business recruitment is our supply chain efforts. We're working now with Coca-Cola, and we intend to do this with other large companies that have huge supply chains. And so with respect to Coca-Cola, we've met with them, and then I asked them to produce a list, which we'll get in the coming days, and the list is bifurcated. Not interested in national contracts, right? No small business is going to supply Coca-Cola's bottles, right, in Denver, if they're not doing it already. I'm more interested in who supplies your light bulbs, who supplies the grease to run your machines, how do you get the nuts and bolts for those machines, all the kind of things that we can source locally. And then, so once I have that list, we will then, we have a division of small business opportunity, and I will query what small businesses can participate in that supply chain with Coca-Cola. And again, there's one thing I've learned in my first stint in public services: the government has a tremendous power to convene. Right? Mayor Brinkman calls you, you're going to answer that phone call, and you're probably going to show up at that meeting. So I'm doing the same thing, just using that type of efficacy to bring the Coca-Cola to the table with small business and make some meaningful introductions and say, hey, what about this business? What about that business? And can we open up markets to the small business community to participate in the supply chain of some of our largest corporate citizens? And so we will do that with other large participants, but I'm very excited about that because I will just open up markets to small businesses, and it makes a lot of sense because you think about the transportation costs, the publicity, the ability to control your supply chain. If they're across the street, it's much easier than if they're in another state. Next pillar is sustainable neighborhood development. The objective here is to provide strategic investments, primarily using our federal funds in neighborhoods that have been hardest hit by the economic recession. A lot of initiatives here. In the interest of time, again, I'm not going to go through them all. I do want to just touch on two. First is we've been working for about a year to develop a net zero energy neighborhood at the Buckley Annex, and that is property that we in the city of Aurora have acquired from the Air Force. It's a former Laurie Air Force and Buckley Field, and so the good news is the price is right on that land, and so that allows us some flexibility. And so what we've been working on for just about 9 months is to so that's been master planned through countless community efforts. We did not touch the master plan. And so the mandate that I've given staff is to determine how we can develop that according to the master plan so that the entire community produces as much energy as it consumes. So that basically boils down to highly efficient buildings with solar on the rooftops and a geothermal loop that is basically a heat sink that makes these homes even more energy efficient. And so we engaged R&L to come up with that analysis, and they came back with the sticker the price for that. It's about $34 million of incremental cost to achieve net zero. The good news is it's all in the geothermal and solar production. You can achieve net zero by building Energy Star 3.0 rated homes, which they're doing already. So you don't have to have a super energy efficient building as long as you have enough solar and geothermal production. Okay, so then, okay, great. How do you finance the $34 million? And that's the tricky question. And then more importantly, how do you work with the utility so that everyone plays nice in the sandbox? And so we've been having discussions with Excel over the last 6 months to figure out how this is structured. We've brought several developer sponsors. These are entities that are backed primarily by large corporations and wealthy investors. The federal tax policy is such that if you invest in these geothermal and solar systems, there's a huge tax credit that you get. And so as a federal policy to induce investment, and so you have to have a lot of passive income, be a profitable corporation to take full advantage of that. And so large banks and investment banking firms have compiled that money for these purposes. And so that's how these developer sponsors are financed. They are paid back, one through the tax credit. It used to be a cash rebate. But also, they, in essence, are selling the energy consumed to whoever is underneath that solar panel, and that's the other stream of payment. So we've been coming up with this relatively sophisticated structure such that these developer sponsors, I left out the best part, and for that benefit, that tax benefit, for that revenue stream of energy production, they will buy, install, and maintain all of the solar equipment. This is, in essence, you're leasing it from them. And so that then takes care of the incremental cost to the home buyer, right? And so instead of paying Xcel Energy your utility bill, you pay the developer sponsor because that's who's giving you your energy. And that's why Xcel Energy has to play nice in the sandbox.
Yeah, the challenge that I understand with Xcel when you're playing in the sandbox is when you use some of their infrastructure, there's a
That's
depreciation of capital, and so if they get nothing out of it because they're not supplying
That's
any
right.
energy, they end up being upset.
That's right. I feel you're not just a pretty face, you're very smart, and so that's exactly right. And so I can't get into too much more detail, but you're spot on as to the discussions we've been having, and I think we are at a place where we figured that out. And I'd love to report back to you. We're weeks away, I think, from some announcement along those lines, and I'd love to walk through that in a little more detail, but I am bound by confidentiality at this point. The other thing I'm really excited about, so that's one big, huge initiative. It's also mind-numbing work. The other thing we've been doing, and I'd also be happy to present this. This is, I think, one of the coolest tools ever, and it's a GIS map of targeted investment neighborhoods. And that's a fancy way of saying, and the best way I can explain it is if you think about a binder, a 3-ring binder, and on the bottom is just a map of the city of Denver with all of its neighborhoods, right? And then on top of this map are just opaque, clear pages. And on those pages is a tab as to the stakeholder, whether that's the Office of Economic Development, private investors, the federal government, the state, you name it. And so each one of these stakeholders has their own opaque page, except that there is a circle that demonstrates where they have made investments and the intensity of that investment on a dollar per square block basis. Okay? So we've been able to drill that information down to the address. And so you can start to see as you flip these pages, and maybe the first page is the state, the Office of Economic Development, CHAFA, so on and so forth, these concentric circles begin to line up. Downtown Denver, to no surprise, right? You build a new skyscraper or buy a new skyscraper and retrofit it, that's going to mean a lot of intensity. But the cool thing, and so we've developed this, but it's a GIS electronic version of that. And you just start to see these investment circles and where they occur at the address level and the intensity that they occur. And so the reason this tool is so cool, in my opinion, is that, one, it signals to the city where we're putting our resources. Are we drilling down with intensity to fix a neighborhood, or are we spreading peanut butter everywhere? The second thing it does is it signals to the private investment community where investment is happening, and by who, and when. And we've done this over a 5-year period. And then the best part about this tool, in my opinion, is now we will begin the very interesting task of measuring the outcomes of these investments. Put a bunch of money in Sun Valley, what happened to crime? What happened to education? What happened to graduation rates? And really start to see if there is a correlation between investments and when and how they occur and the outcomes that we would like to get, which will then, of course,
Sometimes you don't want to know.
Well, that's true, but frankly, you want to be able to demonstrate why you're making or not making a decision, and also a particular type of investment may have one outcome and another investment may have another. And so, if you're trying to, maybe Sun Valley has the best education system in the world, but the crime rate is out of control. Well, then maybe there's a type of investment you want to target there, not just any. So we have a master's in GIS mapping from Columbia, and she's just done a fantastic job developing this map. It just kind of runs on PowerPoint. You just see over a 5-year period this thing happening and the intensity, and it's just a brilliant piece of work. Yes, ma'am.
Well, or are you overlaying housing and how housing is changing?
That's right. So, just the investment. But yeah, so there's housing, there's business lending, there's the CHAFA loans. We break down the housing in different areas of funding. We have.
So you can see if there's housing redevelopment and
That's absolutely
remodel
right.
stuff.
That's right. That's right. And it's really cool program. I'm not trying to brag on us, but I'm pretty happy with that. Business lending, we have 131 page 16. $131 million loan portfolio that we manage. We lend about $4 million annually. This is a gap financing tool. Loans are anywhere between $50,000 and $350,000, obviously to spur economic development. I talked about the workouts. That's been really the biggest challenge here, and we've been able to get the default rate to something manageable. It's about 9.7% from about 17 or 18% when we started. The only thing I'd like to really mention here is that what we've learned a lot through these workouts that will, I think, make us better underwriters going forward. And that's really, I think, the biggest lesson here. And so as we loan new money, we are smarter and better, hopefully, at it because of the lessons we've been learning as we've analyzed these workouts and right-sided them. The other thing that you'll see us do in the future is we literally just kind of sit and wait for the phone to ring. And people apply for these loans. What we haven't done and what we will do is start, just like I talked about that CDFI initiative, we need to start picking industries, picking neighborhoods, and partnering with the banks and sending our BDRs out and trying to do deals that we want to do and not just do deals that are brought to us. And so that's an effort you'll see in 2013.
And Paul, a city typically doesn't have a loan portfolio.
Yep.
Where do you get the beginnings of that?
Well, this is from CDBG, Community Development Block Grants. And we've been getting them. I think you have to be a certain size city to be eligible. And so this is a revolving loan pool. So the $130 million is, I don't know how many years it's been in existence, but, we get about $7 million annually. And it's just built up over time. And we loan primarily to small businesses and housing developments to spur economic development in areas that we think are important. The other thing that I'm real happy about is we have this is a pretty cool program, a business loan program for concessionaires. I found that DIA per square foot is more profitable than Cherry Creek Mall. And so I'm like, we will lend to that. And so if you're a first-time concessionaire, you have everything but all the cash you need. This program would fill that gap. Seems like a safe bet. So we just launched it, and we'll see how that goes. Next pillar is key strategic projects. These are all the projects that, as I mentioned, don't necessarily fit in a nice little box under a pillar, but they have huge economic impacts. And so, you can look at them, and they're really no surprise. A couple things I'll mention here, and in the interest of time, similar to the DIA concessionaire loan program, we also have a subcontractor cash flow loan program. And this is because, and this just happened, a woman owned business got a huge contract at DIA. She did the happy dance, got started. Takes about 4 months sometimes to get paid back on these jobs, and she's 4 months into her cash flow. Had to hire all new employees, new equipment to service this project, and she's running thin on cash. And again, very safe bet, right? It's our project. We're actually paying the bill. So why not lend to this subcontractor so that they can get to their first paycheck and alleviate that cash flow burden? So again, a pilot program. I'm pretty excited about it. The other thing that I'd like to point out is the Platte River Corridor. That is, I think Denver has one of the most underutilized assets in the country, and that's our Platte River. There's little development around it. The riverfront property is traditionally more valuable than Gulf front property. We have estimated that this can absorb, the Platte River's 24 miles of riverfront can absorb about 10 to 15% of the expected increase in commercial and retail property that will occur over the next couple of decades. It's a $1 billion opportunity, and so we need to clean up that river. The banks are too steep, so you can't access it. So we'll shallow the banks, and then we'll develop and we'll put green fields to flank the river, and we'll develop around that. Some you think about your drive to the ballpark at Sun Valley. You've got a river, you've got a green belt, you've got a river, a freeway, a light rail station, and unobstructed views of downtown Denver. And there's nothing there but a power plant. And so we're going to change that. We're going to fix that. And that story tells itself all through the river. And if you don't believe me, you go down to Confluence Park and you get to see what the potential of a redeveloped river can have on the economic development activities around it. So I'm hopeful that we can replicate that. And finally, workforce development is our last pillar. This is a federally funded program. It's about $20-some-odd million annually, about 2/3 of the 300-person staff. So we spend a lot of time here. And one of the, I think, more interesting initiatives is our expanded summer youth program, where we're trying to provide employment opportunities for youth. We expanded that to include about 2,500 youth participants. That was a Herculean effort, and I think we're going to do even more this year. We've also been looking at increasing the funding sources. As you can imagine, every year we're at 2008 levels on our federal funded program, so that's why I mentioned the $1.5 million grant from the Department of Labor. Even though it's a federal grant, it comes outside of our traditional funding. So we try to focus a lot on how we can be more sustainable, because we're 93% of our budget is federally funded, and we got to fix that because we're one election away from not having an economic development department, because if that funding gets cut, fiscal cliff, sequestration, you name it, we're going to be very much hamstrung. So, in a nutshell, that's kind of what we've been up to for 2012, and we're now thinking about what 2013 is going to look like, and we'll come up with a similar document and a similar way to manage it, and hopefully be a little bit better at it, because we've got a year now under our belt under this new plan.
You sleep.
Oh, yeah. It's a lot of work. This job is. I was just explaining to you that this job has been very intense. But it's interesting. I mean, I'm not, at least at my level, it's really fascinating work. I mean, because you touch so many things, and I've been given a blank slate for the most part, and been able to cherry pick what I thought was interesting and good work. And so, it's been interesting. I've never done anything in public service, but it is. It's not much sleep. I have to admit that. It's a lot to it. There is a lot to it, rather. Yes, sir.
How much changes do you think will be in your initiatives for 2013?
That's another great question, and so I don't know yet. Certainly the pillars won't change, as I mentioned. Most of those strategic initiatives will stay the same. The bullet points will certainly change. We've accomplished some. So I would say I'm guessing about 10% of this plan will carry forward in one shape or fashion. The capital matrix is a great example where we have to update that annually. So that will be in 2013. It may not be a lot of work, but we need to update that. Some of these initiatives we have not accomplished, and I think they're still important. And so we need to carry those forward. And then there's just new stuff, and I think this was really aggressive. I think I literally gave this to the mayor and said, okay, this is everything I can think about. You tell me what you can live with and what you can't live with. And he was like, I like it. And so it got to be, this is, I think, extremely aggressive. So I think the 2013 program will be a little less ambitious, hopefully as innovative, but we'll see.
You see Gates on there?
Oh, yeah, it's a great question. Absolutely. Yep, absolutely. And I wanted to put it in 2012, and I was advised, I think, well advised to not tackle that.
Oh.
Gates is absolutely going to be a 2013 focus. We've already talked to Tompkins. We're already figuring out what resources are available for the remediation of that property. I just want to figure out how we can just remediate it, clean the dirt, raise the building, sell the bricks, and hand the developer something that's less sticky or less hairy. Excuse
The
me.
preservation issue is
Yeah.
resolved. So.
Yeah, exactly. So Gates is absolutely going to be in there. I guarantee it.
There's another issue that Denver will be dealing a lot with, and that's the I-70
Yes.
corridor viaduct and what the future that holds.
And so another very great question. So two answers to that question. It will also be in 2013. We touched a little bit on it. Again, one of those things where I wanted to put it in the plan and was wisely advised not to. So this is my humble. I hope I'm not on camera. I'm never going to repeat this, but it's my humble opinion.
On camera, you're on camera.
Well,
You are on
then,
camera.
Then I think what's important is that we do whatever we can to increase the connectivity of the city of Denver in all respects, both internationally and locally. And I think I-70 is a critical component to that, in that we need to bring the stock show in Elyria, Swansea, Globeville into the community better. And however we do that is extremely important. And I-70 is critical to that. The other thing that's important is whatever we figure out for the stock show must, I think, be a 365-day solution, and it also must support all the stuff I just talked about on the Platte River corridor. It's got to enhance the development of the Platte River up through Brighton, connecting to the airport. And so it's a key component to that, and 70 is right there. So however we bring that community back into Denver so it can realize its full economic potential is what we should be doing, and we look forward to collaborating with CDOT in that respect. I'm glad you told me I was on camera. I think I kept my potty mouth in check.
You
So
did great.
that's rare, so I'll continue that.
I wanted to.
Oh, I'm sorry.
were
I'll take
you
a
up next,
question.
Peggy?
Yeah,
Okay.
what you've described, and we heard a lot of this, or some of this before from you, but what you described seems as though it would work in every community in the state without competing against each other. It's enriching within. So have you thought at all of sharing the show in a bigger way at the state level to get this out? Because let's say we implement some of what you did. That's going to benefit you guys as
Sure.
much as us.
And so, I mean, I guess, so thank you, that's a compliment, I'll take it as a compliment anyway, but I think what I tried to do is, I did start with the Colorado Blueprint Economic Development Strategy to figure out where they were headed, and I tried to make sure that we were complementing what we could at the state level, and certainly not conflicting. And so I think other cities can do the same. They're more than welcome. I'm happy to talk to whoever about our strategy and collaborate to the extent possible. But yeah, I think a lot of these, none of this is rocket science. And I think the process is probably well advised is whoever is in my seat, either later or in a different city, is just to really get out there and talk to as many smart, honest people as possible privately, and then put all the best ideas on a piece of paper, and then figure out how you connect and how you prioritize, and I think you'll come up with a decent document. I don't know what percent is, but it's really low. Or just my mind thought, right? A lot of this is just, oh, that's a great idea, and it just made the plan. And then I think we came up with something that I think resonates to a lot of people because a lot of people had input on it.
What did you do with ideas that might not resonate with everyone?
Well, it's some of them are in here, but one of the things that I promised the mayor and the citizens of Denver is I'm an objective thinker, right? My job, I don't think, is so much to be subjective, but to just say, this the best to the best of my knowledge, these are the facts, and this is an appropriate, rational decision. And then it goes to some decision mail, and you can come to an outcome. But I'm just really trying to advise and cut deals. And so if it's not in here, it's because, my best advisor said it just probably wasn't the best idea, but not for any other reason. So, that's how I defend what's in and what's not in here. And then I'm lucky, too, because most people recognize that, the truth of the matter is this is about 3.5 months of work at the very beginning of a job I just took. So I have to get a little bit of leeway because,
you're on the honeymoon, huh?
Yeah, exactly. So this year there may be some higher expectations that I cover areas in here.
Do you ever talk with an industry that's not on your choice list, and how do they feel?
So yeah, I'll talk to any industry that is a responsible citizen. We don't talk too much about industries other than what is big in Denver. But yeah, I'll talk to, I think any time we can increase employment that's meaningful, that provides good benefits, it doesn't pollute our community, that's a discussion I'll have. So I'm relatively industry agnostic. There are not too many industries that I just would not talk to. There are some, though, of course.
Bruce?
I wanted to, sort of in the same regional vein, I don't know if you guys were involved in it, I kind of assume you might be, but the whole South Broadway streetscape is a lower profile project for Denver. But I think it's sort of a fascinating project because it's infrastructure and it's having a direct impact on a lot of small businesses up and down that corridor, and it can absolutely extend into Englewood and Littleton, and I don't think there's any reason why it shouldn't be, soup to nuts from County Line or Highlands Ranch all the way to the state capitol.
Yep, absolutely.
And if it were all treated as that, I think you've got the whole thing ends up being a bit of a powerful economic engine that you guys sort of catalyzed, by starting the ball rolling with the investment. Sure. Were you was that your deal, or was that something else?
That was not my deal, but I totally agree with what I'm hearing. So, in a lot of the economic development, I think, to the extent it can occur regionally, just has much more impact. The other thing, too, Denver's very lucky about is it has embraced regionalism early, and so that's why we have so much more so many more federal funded projects, because the government, like all of us, are figuring out how we can do more with less. And so to the extent you can have a broader approach to a sticky problem, I think the feds like that. And we're the beneficiaries of that thinking.
First,
I do want to compliment you on what sounds to be a tremendous plan. How different is this past year to what would have been the previous years for Denver's economic projections?
Another great question. And so I'll take all the credit, but the fact of the matter is we have an improving economy. I think the strategy was helpful to maybe make us a little bit more focused and effective. But, I'm going from memory here, but sales tax receipts are up 8.5%. versus about 5.5% nationally. The permitting has doubled, which is important because the permits are a function of the value of what's being permitted. So that demonstrates we have an increase in the value of property. Our downtown vacancy rate is about 11.4%, which is lower than the national average. We are the number one city for construction jobs in the country. Unemployment is down a point, and so we are very small business heavy, which is good because we will accelerate out of this economy, and in my opinion, quicker. The fifth best commercial real estate market in the country, and income is up, and so on and so forth. So I think I've inherited a cooperating economy. It comes in fits and spurts, but I think that's been the biggest part of it. And I think 2013 is going to be even better. I mean, I think we'll have even a stronger economy, and hopefully be able to report November 2013 even better results. So it's not our good work. I think we're doing a lot of the right things to make Denver as business friendly, as neighborhood friendly, as innovative and progressive as possible. And we're just trying to send that message out so that we're attractive from an investment and a relocation standpoint.
Being a partner and eliminating some of that uncertainty, I think, is tremendous, and this clearly does that.
Yeah, I would agree with you, and signaling, I think, is very important, and I think, again, that's one of the things the government can do a very good job of, is just trying to provide certainty, trying to signal what we're up to and where we're headed, and so as an investor, as a homeowner, as a business owner, you're like, okay, I like that or I don't like that, but I can make an informed decision, and hopefully we're doing that.
Paul, absolutely fantastic.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. It's been my honor. Thanks for the invite.
There is life south of I-70.
Yes, I totally agree with that.
Wow. Yes, we had one. Good to see you again.
I hope so.
Okay, next item on our agenda is a presentation from the South Metro Chamber of Commerce. Jeff, are you going to lead that?
I am planning to lead that, Mayor. Thank you for having us and council. We really appreciate being here and look forward to a great discussion about our own initiatives for the current year, but also to answer your questions about what we're up to. To begin, we really wanted to impress upon you who are our leaders in our organization and what we're all about. So most importantly, we're a volunteer-driven organization supported by our investors. So those that are here that I'd like to recognize first are the chair of our Economic Development Group, Rick Whipple, who runs Whipplewood CPAs in the Ken Carroll Valley area with a Littleton address, but in Jefferson County. Second, Norman Stucker is a member of our board of directors, but also chair of the Littleton Business Coalition, which many of you may know about. If not, we're happy to discuss it tonight as well. Also, a proprietor with a Littleton-based business across the street here at PADT. The third is Tom Anzia. Hello, Tom. He's a partner with Felsberg, Holt, and Yolovig, a transportation engineering firm. Also on our board of directors and part of our transportation committee, which is an advocacy group of the Economic Development Group, which we might involve a Littleton issue here and there as well. And then finally, we brought many of our staff. You'll see first Terry McElhaney, our communications director, but you might also know Terry as a Littleton business owner, romancing the bean, and a proud member of the Littleton community. Patrick Pratt is our investor operations analyst and an executive assistant to CEO John Brackney. Marcia McGilly is the executive director of the South Metro Denver Small Business Development Center, which represents Littleton and all of Arapahoe and Douglas counties, and I'll let her speak a bit of what we do in the Small Business Development Center. Brian Bartoni, who is our director of public policy for the chamber, and representing many Littleton-based clients through what they do. And finally, the CEO of the organization, the larger South Metro Denver Chamber, is John Brackney, who is behind me here.
Crowd goes crazy.
Crowd goes crazy. So to be brief, I'd like to give you an overview of what we do in the Economic Development Group, because I know the discussion is around economic development tonight. But it falls further into the larger chamber as well, and I'll start with economic development, but anything related to the chamber as a whole is fair game in this conversation as we see it. But first and foremost, I'm the director of the Economic Development Group, which is an investor-based group of the chamber. Not every investor of the chamber is part of the Economic Development Group. However, the EDG, as we call it, is a focus group within the chamber that is directly looking at economic development in our community. Littleton is a part of that, not only through your investment, but by your own appointment. Council Member Cernanek is part of our Economic Development Group and our Board of Advisors as we meet basically every other month as a full board, and also as a larger organization. We meet monthly, and all of you are invited to be part of those investor breakfasts. Michael was there last month as we had a presentation from Denver Water, but those happen on the second Friday of every month, and you're allowed to be there to view what we hear from a variety of people in our community. But more important than, not more important than our investor breakfasts, and certainly no more important than our investors, but more important than about what we do in economic development, our executive committee has driven economic development down to three very prominent tasks. Number one, business retention and expansion. As you heard from Paul Washington, the business retention and expansion is also a part of the City of Denver's economic development plan. It's also a part of most communities' plans when they focus on economic development. Business retention and expansion for us is focused in very specific engagement with primary employers in the larger South Metro Denver community, and including the city of Littleton. In the last year, many of you have participated with us on these interviews. We've talking to companies like Globus, Littleton Hospital, Norgren. We want to get in front of CenturyLink, the Littleton, not the Littleton Manor, forgive me, the name of the organization on mineral, and South Park Boulevard, basically. There's about 200 employers there. It's the assisted living facility. Several major employers in the community we've been in touch with about their intentions and their happiness in the community, as well as whether they plan to grow, shrink, relocate, all of that kind of stuff. And we do this in a larger way to make sure that our business base is happy. Number two, from the Economic Development Group, we focus on business attraction. There are a whole lot of things that go into business attraction, from site selection, real estate and redevelopment, and pure sales and marketing. We take the angle, and are planning to take the angle specifically on a sales and marketing effort, where we really get to the point of doing trade missions, focusing on bringing new businesses to our community, and hopefully ultimately landing in communities like Littleton, Arapahoe County, and anywhere in our basic area that we're looking at bringing in new businesses. Third, we're focusing on business advocacy, and beyond business advocacy, economic development advocacy. So think about some things where you've even seen us. In the past several years, we've been a major advocate for the Sterling Ranch development. That's a form of business advocacy where we've been behind certain activities and actions that are happening in our community that we believe have a major wealth creation impact upon our larger community. But as I mentioned before, Tom Anzia leads our transportation group. We're focusing very specifically on how transportation affects the economic development of the community. And the Chamber, obviously, is a trade organization. We don't have the funding nor the expertise to actually build roads nor put shovels in the ground. But we have a lot of people and we have a lot of power to be advocates, and that's where we do it. Those are the primary activities of the Economic Development Group. But to take it further, the Chamber gets involved in other areas which touch economic development, and I'll break them down into about three things. Number one, the Small Business Development Center. Marcia McGilly leads the organization, and I'll get into the numbers in a minute. However, their group is focused on business counseling, advocacy, and training for individuals who are starting a business, existing businesses that are looking for assistance, as well as organizations that are looking for very specific curriculum and help that are provided by the statewide SBDC. We're one of 14 organizations in Colorado that do this, and we've been award-winning in the last 2 years for the kind of work that they do. What Marcia does locally is within Arapahoe and Douglas counties, as well as the southern part of Jefferson. Is that correct? And many Littleton businesses also come to the organization for counseling and support. So not only are we supporting the larger community, but Littleton itself. And I have a fact sheet to send out to you after this conversation, where I can answer questions right now. Mayor?
So the businesses that come to you, are they members?
No, not necessarily. They can be members, but I'd say 80% are probably not investors of the Chamber. It's a service provided, SBDC services are provided statewide across Colorado. We serve our region, whether they're investors of the Chamber or not. This other component beyond SBDC work is public policy. Public policy may be very business focused, but it might also have a community-based focus as well. Our Director of Public Policy, Brian Bartoni, and our larger chamber, the Board of Directors, our business leaders for responsible government, and all the entities that get heavily concerned about public policy, whether it be at the Capitol or it be at a local government or even in an initiative, gets involved in issues that involve business advocacy and public policy. And we take a major role in it, often touching on economic development. And then finally, the Chamber itself, and I'll let John communicate about this in a bit, is what we call a full-service relationship marketing firm. And what we mean by that is our investors that are part of the organization are there to support our organization, but they're also there to do relationship marketing as we work with them in their strategic interaction plan to make sure they meet other business people so that they can grow their own business and know how to connect with people that may want to buy or sell their services. Part of what we do is very strategic through our marketing and visibility program, and provides that kind of value that people would expect out of a chamber that goes beyond advocacy, but really internal business-to-business communications. That's important for a business to grow as well. And what we're also communicating with you about tonight is a bit of our strategic interaction plan itself. Every single one of our investors has a strategic interaction plan, and that's part of our marketing and visibility program. The city of Littleton to date has not had one. Until just this year, we've operated off a contract that was established between City Council and the Economic Development Group. But in light of doing that, Michael and I got into some conversations about what was really more important, a contract and obligations that have been, written for 20 years that we're looking at and trying to attack, or really creating a plan that is customized and built around what the City of Littleton expects from the Chamber for its investment in our organization, just as every other client would as well. So what we've communicated about, and you have probably seen, is a copy of the Strategic Interaction Plan that we've crafted, customized for the City of Littleton, and can be customized over the year, over the next 5 years, over time as we help serve your needs as an investor of the Chamber. So, in short, I'd like to leave it as that. Our goals and objectives as a group are to promote economic development, whether it be directly through the Economic Development Group or through the other parts of the Chamber. And we want to directly serve the City of Littleton, as we always have and intend to in the future, through a new mechanism, which is our Strategic Interaction Plan, and look forward to working with you and dialoguing with you on exactly how that should look. And we're all here to answer questions, and if you have any specifics of our leaders or our staff, we're here to do that tonight. So, thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. Any questions? Jeff?
Jeff, as you know, Littleton has a group of citizens who are very budget conscious and watch how we spend our money quite closely.
Absolutely.
And I was asked, because they're looking at where we provide our dollars, specifically what the Chamber has brought to Littleton as businesses, as job growth, that sort of thing. I need a little help in trying to answer that question.
I'll answer that question. For the last year, in the year 2012, our work has been very specifically focused on business retention and expansion as the first wave of an economic development plan that'll be encompassing all three things that we're talking about. And the reason I'm going there is because we've spent a significant amount of time analyzing and looking to our existing business base to make sure that they're happy here and that they're not going anywhere. And what we mean by that is almost a form of farming versus hunting, if you will, making sure that our own are taken care of before we're hunting for new. So to answer your question, Councilmember Taylor, we've not in the last year had a very specific deal where we've landed a new business in the City of Littleton. We have submitted on behalf of the Metro Denver EDC a variety of projects as they come along through their RFP process. But in contrast, we've been very specifically targeting Littleton businesses to make sure they're happy and growing here. And we're hearing very good results. Companies like Norgren, who Councilmember Stallman was on with us, is very happy here, and from what I can tell, intending to grow locally as a manufacturing company and supporting the local community. Littleton Hospital is also very happy here. They're replacing their executive as we speak, and we're working very closely with them on those efforts. Councilmember Cernanek was part of that effort. And while I'm answering your question this way, we're intending to do new things in business attraction, but we're also not planning to abandon business retention under any circumstance. That'll be part of our plan going forward.
And Jeff, you might mention at least some of the things that I experienced in some of the conversations and the interviews on what we affectionately refer to as the BRE interviews, is that a number of BRE, business retention and expansion interviews. So I said affectionately. And what was kind of interesting is that there were a number of businesses where no one from the local community necessarily reached out. And yet what was found is that a number of businesses, medium to large businesses, are contacted fairly regularly to be recruited to move elsewhere. And being in a position where someone actually contacts them locally is, you're loved at home. You don't necessarily have to move, and folks aren't necessarily looking to move, but when you have the constant knock on the door, kind of sounds like the Big Bang Theory, penny, penny, penny. But inside joke, I suppose. It's one of those things where sometimes they start to listen, and it ends up being a distraction to their business. But ultimately, if they feel unloved, it might not be, or it might be something that actually triggers a move away. And so your retention starts with, and as Paul talked about it earlier, it's that the relationships, and it's being in a position where the effort has been to include someone from local government where they can, but certainly folks from the community that are saying, why are you here? What are you looking for? And the report from some of those interviews hasn't necessarily come back, although some intro thoughts have been shared. But those are the things that I kind of found as eye-opening would be a good word.
I would concur, and thank you for asking that. The real eye-opening pieces that we found in this entire process across the South Metro region, beyond the city of Littleton, is that there are, one, a plethora of businesses that have been here doing business a long time, and no one's ever reached out to them to ask how they're doing, why they're there, if anyone cares that they're there, and if anyone ever wants to keep them there. So one question that we will commonly ask, John's very good at this, is has anybody been here before? And the answer is typically no. That's an interesting sign. We collectively as a community for years have neglected the BRE effort that is important to be doing. But number two, we do hear good trends. There are happy businesses in our community, which is a fine thing to be hearing. There have not been major difficulties doing now. So in the trending that we're noticing, we're not seeing that there's a major issue that's going to be pushing business away or taking it somewhere else. There might be macro level issues. But on a macro level, we have unearthed two very specific projects where it required intervention in terms of business retention to make sure that pretty large companies weren't leaving our community. None of them were in Littleton, fortunately, but in the South Metro Denver area, they are occurring, and it would have been unknown to us had we not been proactive in getting in front of these companies. And that's really the goal of this process. We don't want to hear as we walk into Norgren that they're considering a relocation, but if we happen to hear something like that, we'd have to react to it. And I didn't mean to use Norgren as an example, because it was actually...
Norgren is incredibly happy
absolutely.
here.
And that's very true. And that's why I said that. We were on it, and that was the actual opposite.
Love Norgren.
We had a wonderful conversation with their new general manager, Brian Crow, and it was nothing but positive. In fact, they're investing in that site and have sold a site off to create a new charter school on the north side, as you all know. So...
Bruce?
I guess what I want to say is more of a comment. We're kind of dancing around an issue that is, what is the appropriate relationship for a city government, the city of Littleton, a smaller, medium-sized city with very limited funds, nothing even on any ratio competitive with what Denver has. What is the relationship of this government with the small businesses that mean so much to our economic vitality? And whatever that answer is, I think it's a different answer than what it's been for the last several years. And Mr. Washington kind of touched on it. We're emerging from something. We can find lots of reasons for why, but the fact is that was then, and now what we have is we're getting ready to emerge. The economy's going to pick up. Denver's picking up. The South area as a place to live is picking up. Opportunities are abounding. And so we have to decide as a city now, in this newer atmosphere, what is our relationship with small businesses? And what we need to do then, the end of my comment is, make a determination from an economic development point of view for the city, from a governmental point of view as far as being the local government, and from an economic development point of view as far as the chamber, how do we take best advantage of this opportunity? Because we'll miss it if we don't think about it and do it. And obviously that's been the mayor's agenda for the last almost a year, but we're getting to that point where we have to actually produce. because it's happening around us. And I think that's kind of the comment that I wanted to make. So I'm glad you're making the comments that you are and kind of dancing around the issue of, we really haven't reached out to the businesses in the last 10 years in the Littleton area. They've been here, some of them have received economic gardening assistance, et cetera. But as a policy, we haven't been the partner. And that's the direction that I think we're trying to go in.
And if I may, Jeff, maybe one of the things you want to do is have Norm talk about what he's working on right now, because that might get to some of the local
Absolutely.
business.
Why don't we invite Norm up here if you'd be willing and dive into it.
And Norm, thank you for having your business in Littleton.
Yeah, thank you. And I'm also a Littleton resident, by the way. So I live in Littleton. My business is probably 100 yards right across the street on the west side of Prince Street, PADT. But I've also been working with the Chamber for about the last 6 months to form what we call the Littleton Business Coalition. Michael's been a part. John and Michael are both non-voting members, but the other part of the steering committee includes Littleton Hospital, Lockheed Martin. We're reaching out to Norgren to have them be a part of it. I think that's going to occur in the near future. It hasn't been completed as yet. Colorado Business Banks have been a part of it as well. And so it's very much in its enabling stage. But it is, our vision really is to create that tie with the business community in Littleton, from small, medium, and large businesses. So we are having a meeting next week where Michael's going to be presenting the city's plan. Another person that's going to be presenting is Marcel, can't remember his last name, from Spur, right down the street. Small business owner who just moved into the city, I think 6 months ago. Absolutely loves it so much. He is thinking of relocating his residence from Parker to live in Littleton. Absolutely loves it, cannot wait to be part of it. We're looking to engage Hoodlum as well, but what our main focus is not the retail business, it's the commercial businesses that really haven't seen the attention that we've been talking to. And so we're going to them, literally calling them, knocking on doors, figuring out those points of connections. It's been a little bit slower to get the ball going because they're wondering why. But we're committed to that movement, and we're hoping to increase in numbers. We talked a lot about our steering committee. We're also looking to form another 20-person advisory group to that committee and have about 25 people that we would meet on a monthly basis. The steering committee would meet, the advisory committee would meet on a bi-monthly basis. Occasionally we'd have some larger programming activities for the community, but intentionally focusing on a core group of people that can look specifically at Littleton businesses. Our vision statement is a 21st century business environment in a 19th century community. And that links the community and the history of Littleton together with the vision to move forward and see all our businesses grow and thrive. So that's the vision, and all welcome to have help you promote it as you talk to other Littleton businesses people. They can be in touch with myself or Francisca Clark from the Chamber, who really is the staff person from the Chamber working on that.
So I mean, as you go through the establishment of that process, what is your sense of partnering with the city? What areas are you guys identifying, or they come up in conversation where the city could be participatory in terms of driving some proactive results?
Well,
has it gotten to that point?
It has not gotten to that. The idea is that, having Michael participate with us, that we are really in lockstep as we move forward. Eventually, when we start forming a committee and starting dealing with the issues of the businesses that come to us, one of the companies, I can't identify them, you'd know them if I say them because they haven't joined our group, but they're talking to us because they have some land use concerns. I think we anticipate that will come up in the future, although it has not come up now. infrastructure requirements, what is it that these businesses are facing from a business standpoint that we can help be their advocates for? Is it literally bringing a voice to the small businesses who don't feel they have one? Is it advocating for certain positions, certain policies, but at least having a place where Littleton businesses know that they're welcome and they can have their voice without being, obviously the chamber is this, but something specifically for Littleton. That's really the goal. The larger goal of the chamber is to form really tight relationships. But it's hard to do it when you're covering all of the South Metro area. It's easier for us to do it if we're just looking at Littleton. And once we find those relationships, we'll understand what their concerns are, and then we can see if we can weigh in and help them or yet. So that's, the long-term vision, what that actually means. How does that engage with what the city can do, with what the chamber can do, with what individual businesses can do?
Right.
We know it can't happen if we're isolated.
And Norm, mine isn't as much a question as much as to make a statement and then kind of get you and Jeff and maybe John to react a little bit. You probably didn't hear all of this evening's discussion, which started this evening with a report on a citizen survey. And there were two things that might be material to know out of that, which is one of our lower-ranking items, which is actually above, as far as being favorably above a lot of other places, but it's the lowest ranking item that the citizens graded the city on is jobs and employment. Not surprising given the economy, not to, on that. There was also another element that the citizens came back and they understand some of the importance of supporting local businesses and actually buying and that. And then, part of our journey this evening was listening to Paul Washington. You had a chance to hear a little bit about him, but one of the things he said that very often the small and medium-sized businesses are having trouble accessing capital, and not sure what the chamber's role is, or members of the chambers might be. But that would be a question I put out there: is how can we do that? And it mentions a little bit of what Marcia does, which is having a more sophisticated lendee in that access to capital, the borrower that's there, both with regard to their business plan, what they're looking at, and dressing up their credit score so that their very good business idea might be there. I know that we as a city tend to shy away from, or at least historically have shied away from picking businesses, yet Denver seems to be very interested in certain business sectors, and that may be something that we put on this agenda out there together to try and figure out. And the other was an interesting one, because we have certain locations like downtown Littleton, Aspen Grove, that are destination retail in the city, but we probably don't want to have just those be destination retail for some of what we have, because a good portion, and many folks understand this, of a municipality's government support comes through sales tax dollars, and how to do that so that we're not a bad regional citizen in that competition, but are doing that in a way. And so, jobs, which to some extent it doesn't matter where the job is as long as it's convenient to the city. And access to capital, and what can we be doing to seemingly support what the citizens already realize is important to support the local businesses.
To indirectly ask the question, do you mind if we would invite Marcia up here to talk a little bit about that and just the SBDC in general? Would that be a good transition for you?
Here.
Hi, thank you for allowing us to come this evening. It's nice to be here. I'm Marcia McGilly, and I run the South Metro Denver SBDC. I wanted to directly address access to capital first and foremost. We have just in the last 90 days hired a full-time business consultant who has a financial background. The purpose being he comes from banking as well as micro-lending background, and his sole goal is to help people find access to capital. Our clients are getting capital. We have, I think, I didn't pull the number today for everyone, I just pulled the numbers for Littleton, but I think in the South Metro Denver, we're over probably about $7 million of capital this year for small businesses. Let me describe our clients. They are 2 to 20 employees. We have about 60% existing businesses and 20% and 40% startups. That being the case, we have a full-time person with that focus. Let's start with that. Second of all, we have twice a year we have a lenders panel, which is coming up on December 5th. It'll be in the paper this week. And we have all of the lenders that are accessible for small business. We don't have venture capitalists or angels there. That's not who these small businesses are looking for right now, although we do have the knowledge of those kinds of lenders. So it's the micro lenders, it's the SBA, it's CoBiz Bank, those kind of people that are coming. We do that twice, and that is open to the public. And we also hold workshops on access to capital. Did that answer your question?
Beginning part, you might
Yes.
want to cover the coaching or resources that we have. I think most of us are aware of what we do with our own BIA. That may be a legacy term. I don't know. Okay. Whatever the part.
Economic Vitality Department.
Okay. Thank
Oh, I like that. That's nice.
We can use a marketing effort around some of that, so I can grab.
What's the question?
What do you do in helping coach folks to a business plan that actually will hold together? So it's not just the capital that's out there, but it's how do you take folks through that? Paul talked about one of it is access to capital, and then it's access to market or marketing, and then it's how do I dress it up so that I actually have a plan?
So we do two basic things. We do first and foremost training and workshops. Some of those are 2-hour, how to write a business plan. We try to get everybody to go to that just to understand an overview, a very macro level. We then have a 12 to 15-week business plan class that they actually graduate as a certificate program funded by the legislature. It's called the Colorado Leading Edge, and they graduate with a fully realized business plan. It's 20 to 35 pages with addendum, and they do a milestone on marketing with all their market research, and they're graded. They get feedback from experts in the marketing field. They then turn in their cash flow analysis and their financial documents, and they get feedback, and then they put all that together by the end of the class, and they are then actually graded. We give prizes for the winners, top 3 prizes, and those plans and those companies that go through our Colorado Leading Edge program are probably the clients that see us an average of anywhere between 10 and 20 hours in a year. Those are the companies that tend to get funded, but not only those companies. So that would be somebody that wants to go through our longer program. Someone that didn't want to go through that particular course can simply come in and see one of our experts, whether it be the marketing expert of finance and operations, whatever expert in whatever field, meet with them, go home, do whatever the action items they're assigned, come back, and it is unlimited. We have an average of 5 hours per client is kind of the average. And we'll walk them right through it. We will walk them through step by step. Yes?
So what, though, is the success rate, the tenure and failure rate and so forth?
Okay, so that's a good question. We try to get people not to start a business if they're not going to succeed. So let me just say that. If somebody comes in with an idea or writes a business plan and it's not going to be a success, we give them that harsh reality. I think when people go to the bank for lending, they are taught, the banker sort of looks at their business plan and their idea and says, your baby's ugly, and they try to find out the reasons it won't work. When they come to the SBDC, we try to see, how does your baby look pretty? And how do we help you put that together in a way that's going to be a viable business? Success rate in 5 or 10 years. We don't have a failure rate. I don't have a rate to tell you of businesses that have failed. I don't have people that call me and tell me they closed their business over less than one hand a year. We email our people. We have them on every 30 and 60 days. We check in with our clients. We have over 1,500 in a year, and they tell us whether they're what they're doing, if they got more money, if they got a grant, whatever's going on in their businesses. So we don't have a high failure rate.
Bruce?
You guys, you have some idea of over, say, the past 12 months, how many small business owners within the city limits have been involved in your process?
Let's just pass this around. Yes, I do. And I'm taking time. Okay. So 100, just year-to-date, 140 clients that are Littleton residents, 127 appointments those clients have had, 65 are initial, 62 are follow-up, meaning they're coming for more than one appointment. Over and above that, we have had 84 information calls, people that just called and said, we need economic gardening, we refer them back to you. We need to know about permits in the city of Littleton or anything related to business, we refer them back to you. 7 businesses have started this year. 20 businesses are in the launching stage and will start soon, probably in the first quarter.
This is within the city limits?
This is just Littleton, yes.
Well, but
You have some zip codes that go a little bit outside?
no, those would be in the city limits.
Right.
Is what I'm saying. So
Yes, it
you're right
includes
about
those.
Jeffco and South, but not out by Ken Carroll.
No.
Okay.
No, I got your map, and I pulled by the zip code that fits
Okay.
your geographics. Let's see, I had a couple of other statistics. Employee-related, I thought this might be interesting to you. Full-time employees companies that we've dealt with, about 425 employees, and part-time would be 50. So that's it's 475 employees impacted by those companies. And the annual sales that we're dealing with these 140 clients are over $9 million, just so you have a size range of the kinds of companies that are coming in. It's about 50-50 about male-female ownership, which is an interesting dynamic because overall we have more male than female in the South Metro area. In Littleton, we have a closer to 50-50 ratio. Not a high veteran population. We do have a consultant that helps with veteran-owned businesses specifically. That's a new initiative we just started in the fourth quarter, and that number is not very high for this city. Any other questions? Yes? We did. Thank you. In 2011, we were named the U.S. Small Business Administration Region 8 Small Business Development Center of the Year for Innovation and Excellence. We won that predominantly with everything we did in meeting and exceeding all of our goals, as well as the fact that we work very tirelessly with the Clean Tech Open, with energy and clean tech companies in the area.
Got a setup question.
No, it wasn't. If you look, it's at the very top of your page. It's at the top of our, we're very proud of it. It's a team effort. It's a team award, and we worked very, very hard for that. We were nominated for that. Yes.
Can you tell me about the Leading Edge program?
Sure. That is the Colorado Leading Edge, is funded by the legislature. They have a number of grants that we apply for, and then we have to match that money. CoBiz Bank is the person that matches that grant for us, and we have anywhere from 8 to 20, I think 5 is the most we've had in that class, and it is the 12 to 15-week business plan class. It covers every area of business. Right now it's on Wednesday nights from 6 to 9, and we have different experts that come in and speak on the different business areas, and they have assignments every week, and it's a rigorous plan.
What's the actual cost per pupil?
$495. If they are chamber investors, we do give them a break, since we're using the chamber's space and whatnot. And if they're a CoBiz Bank customer, thank you, we give them $100 off as well. And we have scholarships. Everything we do, if it does have a cost, we do have scholarships.
Any other questions? Bruce?
Thank you.
I was going to ask maybe Jeff sort of a follow-on question, unless somebody else has a small business SBD question.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Paul Paul Washington had mentioned tonight, and then back when we did the panel discussion with them, I don't know, when was that? March, February?
Summertime.
Was it in the summer?
Yeah.
Okay.
July.
All right.
This year.
I always get those two confused.
Yeah.
But anyway.
It's easy to get those months confused.
They talk a lot about the supply chain item, where you've got these industry clusters, and the job growth attributes of finding businesses that locally support industry clustered entities. And that's come up a couple different times, and it's sort of intriguing. Obviously, get what you guys are doing on the retention side, but in terms of that attribute of the growth or development piece of the whole thing, has there been much in the works? Is there stuff that's being planned? Has there been any traction?
That's a terrific question, and in fact, that's one of our agendas for doing business retention and expansion work first, before we get into the pure business attraction, because we're learning, or at least we're asking, what in individual supply chain is missing. For most businesses, their supply chain is the Starbucks coffee shop and the a office supply company, but it could be a variety of things. So we're trying to find out in aerospace or in energy or other clusters that are common in the South Metro region, what those might be that would attract a secondary workforce or a secondary set of suppliers that we could go after. Littleton sees a lot of that from its major outside primary employer, Lockheed Martin, which happens to be the largest private sector employer in the region. But the aerospace industry clustering in the South Park area and everywhere else is a part of that. And as we get into our attraction efforts, I can certainly see that being part of our work in that supply chain or in an energy supply chain, which will probably be the two areas we focus right now. We haven't completely determined that, but those seem to be trends that are worth pursuing without doing too much analysis.
Okay.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
No?
Any other questions? Thank you. Bruce?
Just from a city self-interest perspective, such a large percentage of our revenue comes from retail sales. It doesn't come from services, and it doesn't come from other types of business. It's the kind of sales that are actually made here in the city for a product. How can we use the chamber to understand and assist us in that reality? Because for us as a city, we need to find new revenue sources to pay for the ever-increasing cost of service. And that I don't know that that's your primary mission at the chamber.
That's another terrific question. And no, it's not our primary mission as we've defined it in the EDG. It tends to be a more primary job focus. And it's been that way historically with our partnerships to the Metro Denver EDC and the state. Quite frankly, and from my previous economic development experience, the retail attraction world is the wild, wild west. There's a lot of regional partnerships, and you hear about it from the cities and the counties and the Metro Denver EDC when it comes to primary jobs. There's a lot of very good cooperation. But you probably experienced this, and you probably know it, and you probably anecdotally from an outsider could tell you there's not a lot of collaboration there. And figuring it on your own is probably what you're doing a bit. But second to that, to answer your question, the strategic interaction plan that we work with you on specifically defines how we might refocus or retool our efforts to really support what might be your needs in the city of Littleton. So that's where I'd like to go. If that is indeed a need that we want to focus on, let's build it into your strategic interaction plan and go after it. Because essentially the concepts are the same. It's just a matter of where we look and how we go after it.
Just a discussion point was, it has been proposed that the city maintain a database of retail sales clients in a way that it goes beyond just who has a tax license, so that we begin to look at the networking opportunities, be able to answer questions about those kinds of things. And it sounds like it would not be a database that you all have. It might be something that would maybe partner up with it, but it's not duplicating your effort.
It wouldn't directly duplicate our effort, no, but we would certainly be able to also help you in that effort, because we have access to data. We find data. We'd be very eager to work with you on that, and no, there'd be no way we'd be worried about duplication. In fact, that's what I really appreciate about the chamber organization, is its flexibility as well as its our ability to serve our individual clients and be part of supporting the economic growth in the larger community. So however we want to define that, we'd be eager to work with you.
Any other questions? Thank you.
Thank you for your time, and would you like a quick comment from our own CEO, John?
Yes, we would.
Yes, we would. You're good, John. I'd be remiss if I didn't recognize my own, boss, John, and for what they do at the larger chamber, and for being here tonight. And if you have anything final to say, you're good.
No, I'm happy to answer any questions if you like.
All right. We're good. Well, we really appreciate your time tonight.
Thank you.
And,
Thank you, Jeff.
thank you for having us. Let us know if you need anything else.
Thanks for having us.
All right, that's good.
Thanks, guys.
Council, unless there's anything else, we're adjourned. Oh.
I was just going to, as we may look at the strategic interaction plan, do we feed that information to Michael? Okay, because that's in a sense where Bruce's question goes.
Okay, thank you.
All of the